Book 9, His Fame Shakes the World, Chapter 39, The Cover-Up and the Truth. Linley returned to Count Wharton's manor. When he did, he locked himself into his courtyard, forbidding anyone from entering. Although it was Wharton and Nina's wedding, after learning that Reynolds had died in battle, Wharton knew how his big brother must be feeling right now. Nobody in the Count's estate dared to go disturb Linley. The courtyard door remained firmly shut. Linley sat at a stone table. There was a single flask of wine and 2 wine cups on the table. One wine cup was in front of Linley, the other was opposite of him. Only, nobody was sitting opposite of Linley. Linley poured wine into both of the cups, then raised one of them in a toast. Fourth bro, Linley stared straight ahead, his gaze seeming to pierce through the walls of reality. His eyes, however, were red. Have a good journey. Raising his head, Linley gulped the entire cup of wine down. Fourth bro had died. Linley simply couldn't accept this. But first he had interrogated Emperor Johann, and then he had interrogated the people of the Dunstan clan. He had even carefully inspected the expressions on the faces of the Dunstan clan's people. Linley had come to the conclusion that perhaps, his fourth bro truly had died a glorious death in battle. Perhaps it hadn't been anyone's fault at all. But what Linley didn't know was that only the 3 or 4 core members of the Dunstan clan knew the truth. Neon Dunstan knew that Linley would pay attention to their expressions, which is why he hadn't told anyone else the truth. There was one other person who knew the truth. Reynolds' mother. This was the so-called Madame the Guards had mentioned earlier. Reynolds' mother was heartbroken. Neon knew very well that in front of Linley, Reynolds' mother wouldn't be able to dissemble at all, which is why no women were present at all in the main hall. Naturally, Reynolds' mother hadn't been there either. Fourth bro, you were the smallest of us 4 brothers. I didn't expect that you would have been the first to depart. Linley's heart felt as though it had been stabbed by knives, and 2 trails of tears began to flow down uncontrollably. Snatching the wine flask with his hands, Linley raised his head and began to drink. Cough, cough. After drinking so fast, Linley began to cough. But after coughing 2 or 3 times, Linley once again raised his head high and drank it all down. Bibi and Haru stood in the corner of the courtyard, not daring to disturb Linley at all. This is the 4th time the boss has been so heartbroken, Bibi said to himself. The first time was when he had broken up with Alice. The second time was when he had learned of his father's death. The third time was when Grandpa Douring had passed away. Family members, friends, one after the other, they had left him. Linley felt great pain, but Linley knew, he had to be strong. Because he had other family members and other friends. He had to be strong, both for the sake of the dead as well as for the sake of the living. Let me just wallow in my misery for 3 days, then. Linley painfully cracked his lips into a laugh. Then, without holding back at all, he cried as he wished, drank as he wished, laughed as he wished, mumbled as he wished, reminisced as he wished, or even spoke to Reynolds as though he were there. 3 days later. Kriayak. The door to the courtyard swung open. Delia had been waiting outside the courtyard the entire time for the past few days, and had asked a servant to bring a stone bench over. She had been sitting there, reading as she quietly awaited Linley. 3 days. Linley had shut himself in his courtyard for 3 days, and Delia had waited outside for 3 days. Hearing the door creak open, Delia turned her head in surprised pleasure. Right now, Linley was dressed in a long, light blue robe. His back was still ramrod straight, and he didn't look the slightest bit downtrodden. Linley, delighted, Delia immediately went over to welcome him. Linley looked at Delia, and as he did, he felt a warm, thankful feeling in his heart. Given Linley's current level, how could he have been unaware that Delia had been waiting outside for 3 full days? Although he was inside the courtyard and was separated from Delia by a gate, Linley could sense Delia's presence at all times. Linley suddenly reached out and took Delia into his arms. Delia was stunned. Linley had never hugged her on his own accord before. Holding Delia in his arms, Linley lowered his head. The tip of his nose brushed against Delia's fragrant hair. The smell was so intoxicating. Smelling her scent, Linley felt his heart grow calmer. It was as though a lonely little boat had finally reached the harbor. Delia. Thank you. Linley's voice sounded out next to Delia's ear. Hugging Linley and resting her head against Linley's chest, Delia felt happier than she ever had been. She had spent years in the institute hoping for this, then 10 more years waiting. Now, it seemed as though her dreams were closer than ever before. After the day Linley exited the courtyard, him and Delia had drawn a step closer. Sometimes, they could tell what the other was thinking from a mere glance. Only, Linley didn't push past the final barriers between them, and Delia didn't try to do so on her own accord either. How is his lordship doing? Gates spoke softly to Warden in the training courtyard of the manor. A hint of a smile was on Warden's face. After exiting his courtyard, my big brother's been quite close with Ms. Delia. When I saw him just now, he was even smiling. Most likely, he's feeling much better now. Gates nodded slightly. When his lordship didn't leave for 3 days, it really was quite worrisome. Fifth brother, do you think his lordship is like you, so easily abandoning himself to despair? Another terrifyingly large and powerful man nearby said with a laugh. Second brother, why are you criticizing me? Gates said unhappily. The Count's estate was very peaceful. Linley continued to live a life of quiet training, while at the same time, making his preparations to head out to the anarchic lands. Your Imperial Majesty, Master Linley seems to be acting as he always has. He's focused on his training. There are no abnormal activities. But of course, on the day of Lord Warden's wedding, Master Linley paid a visit to the Dunstan clan. The palace attendant reported respectfully. Emperor Johan's face was covered with smiles. Wonderful. You can leave now. Emperor Johan said calmly. Knowing that Linley hadn't acted out of the ordinary, Emperor Johan felt much relieved. Fortunately, Linley really believed that what I said was the truth. The Dunstan clan knew how to act as well. Emperor Johan was very satisfied. He knew that given the influence the Dunstan clan had in the military, they definitely knew the truth of the matter. Most likely, they had found out about it even before Emperor Johan himself had. But clearly, Linley hadn't learned anything from his trip to the Dunstan clan, and truly believed that Reynolds had died in battle, with the soldiers of Neil City unable to rescue him. Delia stared at a letter in her hands, then stared at Linley. She had a miserable look on her face. Delia, what is it? Linley looked questioningly at Delia. Delia shook her head helplessly. This is a letter from my parents. They say that my grandmother is seriously ill, and want me to go home immediately. My grandmother, a worried, sad look was on Delia's face. Linley reached out to hold Delia's hand. Staring at Delia, he consoled her, don't worry. Your grandmother will be fine. Linley, I have to rush home. Delia looked helplessly at Linley. I had planned to go with you to the anarchic lands, but now. Linley smiled and consoled her, it is fine. You go home first. Given my squad's abilities, we should be able to quickly set up a base in the anarchic lands. In the future, when you come looking for me, it will be easy to find me. Delia looked at Linley, unwilling to part from him. But her grandmother was seriously ill. Her parents' letter had made her extremely worried. There was nothing she could do, she could only choose to leave and return to the Yulan Empire. The next morning, Delia mounted on the back of the Wild Thunderstorm Hawk and flew directly back to the Yulan Empire. Within a prefectural city in the central administrative province of the O'Brien Empire. Within a courtyard owned by a high, luxurious hotel. Yale was casually flipping through a number of letters he had received. HRM? Something about fourth bro? What happened to fourth bro? Can it be that he rendered military merit and is about to be promoted? A hint of a smile was on Yale's face. In the past, of the four brothers, Yale and Reynolds were both the playboy types. They had chased after girls together. The two of them had acted degenerately together, while George and Linley had been rather self-controlled. Opening the letter, Yale began to read. And as he did, Yale's face immediately turned white. His body suddenly began to shake uncontrollably. Yale held his head in his hands and closed his eyes. After a long time, Yale finally opened his eyes. His face was totally ashen. Not a hint of blood could be seen. Impossible. Moisture could be seen in Yale's eyes. Soon, they turned red. Forcibly swallowing the grief in his heart, Yale continued to read. After finishing, fourth bro. Yale's tears began to flow. If one was to ask Yale who were the people that he cared the most about, it definitely wouldn't be his older biological brother. The relationship between them was relatively cold. After all, within the Dawson conglomerate, there were many struggles and much infighting. In the 10 years after leaving the Ernst Institute, although Yale had come to trust some people, he hadn't truly treated any of them as lifelong friends. In his heart, there were only 3 lifelong friends. The 3 he had made in his youth: George, Linley, Reynolds. Yale stood there, his entire body shaking uncontrollably. Suddenly, a flash of electricity appeared in his hands, turning the letter into ash. Yale was a lightning-style magus. He was the weakest of the 4 brothers, having only reached the level of magus of the 6th rank. Prince Julin. Yale ground his teeth, his entire body still shaking. You actually just stood there and watched, and let my brother die. I don't care who you are. I will make sure you die. Yale took a deep breath, closing his eyes. He forced himself to calm down. The Dawson conglomerate was very influential amongst the common folk, and border cities such as Neal City were cities which the Dawson conglomerate viewed as being of great importance. The merchants and nobles there had many dealings with the Dawson conglomerate. Perhaps the secret could be kept from Linley, but there was no way they could keep the secret from the pervasive, world-spanning Dawson conglomerate. There is no way that father would mobilize the forces of the conglomerate to deal with the prince for my sake. In addition, even if he tried to, he wouldn't necessarily be successful. Yale understood this. Prince Julin was the administrator for the Southeast Administrative Province. He controlled a huge number of soldiers. How could the Dawson conglomerate fight against him? Third bro. Suddenly, Linley came to Yale's mind, unbidden. Third bro hasn't avenged fourth bro yet. Yale knew very well how much each of the 4 of them cared about the others. He was certain that if Linley knew why Reynolds had died, he would definitely go seek revenge. It must be that Prince Julin and that Emperor whatever hid this from him. Third bro doesn't have an intelligence network. Whenever Yale thought of that adorable youngster who had followed him around and drank and dallied alongside him at the Jade Water Paradise, he felt bitter pain in his heart. Fourth bro, I promise you, third bro and I will definitely avenge you. Yale murmured to himself. Suddenly, Yale roared loudly. Attend me. Make preparations for me immediately. I am going to the imperial capital right now. Quick. I am going immediately. In just 5 short minutes, Yale was mounted atop a fine stallion, with 2 guards by his side. He rushed towards the imperial capital at full gallop. On the way, Yale stopped for nothing, traveling day and night, neither eating nor drinking. On the way to the imperial capital, he switched horses at several cities, continuing to make haste towards the imperial capital at full gallop. After 2 days and 1 night, Yale and his men managed to arrive at the imperial capital. Due to his high-speed journey, both of Yale's eyes were bloodshot, and his face was so ashen and pale that it looked like the face of someone who was seriously ill. "We're here." From far away, Yale saw Count Warden's manor. After 2 days and a night of traveling, Yale finally felt a glimmer of hope. "Lord Yale." The guards at the manor naturally recognized Yale. In the past, Yale had often come to visit Linley. There was no need for them to make any report before letting Yale enter. Only, the 2 guards were puzzled as to why Yale looked so haggard. "Third bro." Yale charged into the manor, then began shouting at the top of his lungs, "Third bro, come out! Third bro, quick, come out!" As soon as Linley heard Yale's first shout, he immediately ran at high speed out of his courtyard. Seeing the distant Yale, Linley was stunned. Right now, Yale's face was extremely pale, and his hair was an absolute mess. Was this the impeccably dressed, handsome, and cheerful boss Yale? Seeing Linley, Yale immediately ran over, grabbing Linley by the shoulders. His bloodshot eyes stared at Linley. And he said in a sobbing voice, "Third bro, you absolutely must get revenge for fourth bro." Book 9, His Fame Shakes the World, Chapter 40, The Secrets of the Yulon Continent. These words stunned Linley. Get revenge? For what? Wait a second. Linley immediately understood. Fourth bro had indeed died an unjust death. Linley grabbed Yale by the arms. "Boss Yale, calm down. Come. Come to my place. Tell me everything you know in detail." Yale nodded slightly. They arrived in Linley's courtyard. What were the circumstances around fourth bro's death? Linley's face was extremely serious. Yale said with solemnity, "Third bro, that day, fourth bro had led his men in a scouting mission outside the city. Who would have thought that they would encounter the soldiers of the Rohalt Empire? Fourth bro was vastly outnumbered. Despite going all out, only himself and a few dozen of his men escaped. Fourth bro and his dozens of men fled to Neil City, and at that time, only 300 enemies were pursuing them. 300. Linley simply couldn't believe it. Right. But simply because the Rohalt Empire's soldiers fired an arrow at the wall near where Prince Julin was currently standing, Prince Julin was terrified. He immediately ordered that nobody was to be allowed to open the city gates. He ordered his men to only stand guard inside the city. This was done solely to protect himself. As for fourth bro and his men, they kept on screaming angrily, "Open the gates," but nobody dared to do so, and just like that, fourth bro and his men were all slaughtered. Linley's heart was beginning to blaze with fury. He could see the scene as if he himself was there. His fourth bro had miserably screamed for them to open the gates, but Prince Julin had forcibly ordered people not to open the gates. Nobody dared to go rescue them either. And so, fourth bro had died. His death was an unjust one, a pointless one. He didn't have to die. Where is fourth bro's body? Linley immediately asked. Yale said in agony, "According to our conglomerate's intelligence network, fourth bro was hit by an arrow on the shoulder, and then the enemy used a warblade to slash open his chest. Fourth bro collapsed at the corner of the walls. And then, the leader of the enemy soldiers took fourth bro's corpse away as a spoil of war." What? Linley couldn't believe it. 300 people before the gates of Neil City. Not only did the guarding forces not attack, they even allowed the enemies to take away fourth bro's corpse. This was an absolute joke. Precisely speaking, the large majority of those 300 soldiers stayed outside of bow range. The real attackers only numbered 10 or so. Those 10 experts didn't care about arrows at all. Yale's heart was filled with bitter pain. Those 10 or so experts killed fourth bro, then took his corpse away, but given Prince Julin's orders, none of the guard soldiers dared to venture out to do battle. The soldiers of the O'Brien Empire were extremely disciplined and would follow orders. But such laughable orders, in all honesty, were extremely hard to accept for them. Fourth bro, in Linley's mind, he could see the scene of how his fourth bro had angrily, desperately, screamed open the gates, outside the walls of Neil City, but the soldiers atop the walls had coldly refused to do so. Such an unjust death filled Linley's heart with endless rage. Fourth bro shouldn't have died at all. Johann and the Dunstan clan both dared to deceive me. Linley, knowing the truth, immediately understood that most likely, the Dunstan clan had done so due to their fear of offending Prince Julian and Emperor Johann. So it turns out that this was all due to that Prince Julian. Linley's rage was building. He had heard of Prince Julian long ago. Emperor Johann was famous for his bias and partiality, and had made his incompetent younger brother the administrator of an administrative province. From this alone, one could tell how much Emperor Johann doted on his younger brother. Third bro, only you are capable of avenging fourth bro. Yale said with pained fury. Yale's heart was filled with self-reproach. He, too, wanted to avenge his fourth bro, but he personally was simply too weak, and the Dawson conglomerate didn't belong to him. Linley nodded, a cold light shining forth from his eyes. Since that Prince Julian caused fourth bro's death, then he definitely must die. Linley turned to stare at Yale. Yale, take a rest. I need to make a trip. What are you going to do? Are you going to act against him now? No. Linley slowly, calmly shook his head. If I were to directly kill Prince Julian, most likely that Emperor Johann would revenge himself upon the Dunstan clan. Fourth bro is already dead. I don't wish for his clan to collapse as well. War God Mountain. Linley stood in front of the tunnel which led to the War God's training area, quietly waiting. Right at this moment, someone flew towards him at high speed. It was Castro. Linley, what are you doing here? Castro questioned. I wish to see the War God. Linley replied. Castro nodded. If that's the case, then let me report your arrival. But right at this moment, a voice rang out next to Castro and Linley's ears at the same time. Linley. Come in. Linley had already prepared the wind shadow spell, and so he flew into the tunnel. Those familiar, winding pathways led him deeper into the tunnels until he arrived at the pit. He dropped down several thousand meters, arriving at the bottom. A few moments later, Linley arrived at that pitch-black stone door. Rumble. That terrifying heat was still there, turning the stone walls scarlet red. Linley said respectfully, Lord War God, I imagine that you already know about my duel with Hadesun. I imagine that I should now be qualified to learn of the secrets you previously spoke about. Enter, then. The War God's calm voice rang out. Rumble, the pitch-black stone door swung open on its own, revealing a tunnel within. A terrifying blast of heat blasted out from within. Linley formed his dragon blood battle chi into his pulse guard defense. What a hot place! Staring deep into the tunnel, Linley was astonished. On the far end of the tunnel, Linley saw an enormous magma pool that was at least 100 meters wide. The lava boiled and hissed and swirled about, but this wasn't the astonishing part. The astonishing part was, in the air directly above the magma pool, there was a ball of fire at least 3 meters long. This ball of fire was pure, scarlet red. It was constantly emanating waves of terrifying heat from mid-air. For Linley to be forced to use the pulse guard defense to protect himself, one could imagine how terrifyingly hot this ball of fire was. The temperature of ordinary lava wouldn't be able to hurt Linley, even if he went near it. Even if he were to walk on top of lava. All he had to do was to control his battle chi to protect himself. There was no need to use the pulse guard defense. Linley suddenly realized something. Where is Lord War God? Linley looked suspiciously in every direction. In the blink of an eye, he could make out the surrounding area. Aside from the central pool of lava, everything could be seen clearly in this area. But there wasn't a human figure in sight. Linley. The War God's calm voice suddenly drifted down from within the ball of fire. Linley stared in astonishment at that hovering ball of fire. Could it be that the war god was that ball of fire? A blurry human figure slowly drifted out from within that ball of fire. In the blink of an eye, that blurry human figure appeared next to the pool of magma. This man was indeed the war god. Linley carefully inspected this war god, whose legend was known throughout the Yulan continent. The war god wasn't an extremely tall man, only around 1.8 meters tall or so. He had the appearance of a man in his 30s. He had thick eyebrows and scarlet red hair which had grown to his waist. Due to his careful observations, Linley suddenly realized that atop the war god's scarlet red hair were multiple blazing flames. The war god's face was as hard and cold as granite, and his eyes were extremely sharp. With every single action, he radiated absolute certainty. In particular, he possessed a terrifying presence which caused Linley's heart to quiver. Such power! Respectful greetings to you, war god. Linley said courteously. The war god carefully looked at Linley, a hint of a smile appearing at the corners of his lips. He nodded calmly. Not bad. I watched your duel with Hadesun. Your attack technique is quite interesting. A hint of a smile appeared on Linley's face as well. Lord War God, I should now be qualified to learn about the secrets of the Yulan continent, right? Linley had already decided long ago that before heading out to the anarchic lands, he would come visit the war god once. And now, he had to seek vengeance for his fourth bro as well. Linley had already made careful calculations. After avenging his fourth bro, he would immediately head out for the anarchic lands. In addition, this meeting with the war god wasn't solely for the sake of learning the secrets. It was also to use the war god's influence to suppress Johann. Who did Johann fear the most? Without question, it was the war god. Linley, the attack you have developed is quite unique indeed. Your current level of power is indeed on par with Hadesun, and is enough to qualify you to be made aware of the secrets of the Yulan continent. The war god said calmly. Linley listened carefully. Linley, do you know how I became a deity? The war god suddenly looked at Linley. Wasn't it through gaining sufficient insight which allowed you to break through the limits of the saint level and reach the deity level? Linley looked at the war god, puzzled. The war god shook his head slightly. It isn't so easy to break through to the deity level. Even Caesar, with his extraordinary talent, spent 5,000 years before reaching the deity level. As for me, although in the past, I had indeed reached the limits of the saint level, it was very hard to take that last step and break through. 5,000 years ago, during a battle, I was fortunate enough to acquire the divine spark of a demigod. I absorbed and fused that divine spark, and thus, I became a deity. Linley was stunned. So the almighty war god whom everyone praised to the high heavens had actually broken through because he had acquired the divine spark of a demigod. What, are you very disappointed? The war god laughed calmly. Linley shook his head. No. It is very incredible that in the past, you were able to reach the limits of the saint level after only a few hundred years. Your eldest disciple, Fane, has spent thousands of years training. By now, he should be at the limits of the saint level as well. The war god laughed. He was very satisfied with Linley's response. Indeed, reaching the limits of the saint level in a few centuries was extremely difficult. It is hard to reach the limits of the saint level. For someone to reach the limits of the saint level definitely means that they have already arrived at the very end of the path of the elemental laws they have chosen. To break past that barrier, what they need is a sudden insight. In an instant, they must fuse together and combine every part of the aspect of elemental law they are training in. Only then will they succeed in breaking through. The war god sighed. In the entire Yulan continent, up until a few decades ago, there had been 6 prime saints who had reached the limits of the saint level and only needed to take one more step before breaking through to the deity level. Now that Caesar has broken through, there are 5 prime saints remaining who are at the limits. One of them is Fane. Currently, in the Yulon continent, aside from those 5 deities, the most powerful people are Fane and the other 4. You should already know by now how powerful Fane is. Linley nodded slightly. Linley was now beginning to truly interact with the hidden aspects of the Yulon continent. Lord War God, what level of power does the Holy Emperor have, in comparison with those hidden experts? In the future, Linley would definitely have to deal with the Holy Emperor. Naturally, he needed to ask this question. The Holy Emperor. The War God paused for a moment, then said, amongst the hidden experts of the continent, aside from the deities, Fane and the other 4 prime saints are the most powerful. They need only a single step to reach the deity level. Beneath them are the likes of the Holy Emperor. There are roughly 10 or so people on this level. Below them are those people on Hatesun's level. Most of the experts who lie hidden here in the continent are on Hatesun's level. The Holy Emperor is more powerful than Hatesun. Linley memorized this little fact. The War God cast a warning glance at Linley. The Holy Emperor trains in oracular magic. Oracular magic is extremely powerful. It is normal for him to be on a higher level than Hatesun. Linley looked at the War God, then asked, Lord War God, then what are the secrets of the Yulon continent? What are they? Linley had been curious this entire time. For what reason had the Yulon continent attracted so many experts to remain here on this plane? In the 4 higher planes, there is another name for the plane of the Yulon continent. A hint of delight was in the War God's face. What name? Linley's eyes lit up. The Necropolis of the Gods. The War God said softly. The Necropolis of the Gods. Linley's heart thumped. Lord War God, even if deities were to die, there's no reason they would have to come to our Yulon continent to be buried, is there? Of course not. The War God laughed calmly. 5,000 years ago, many of the experts who descended from other planes were deities. There were even gods and high gods. They engaged in warfare and slaughter here in the Yulon continent. In the end, aside from a few who left, virtually all of those experts died here. Book 9, His Fame Shakes the World, Chapter 41, The War God's Favor. During one of those battles, I was extremely lucky. Although I had hidden far away, I managed to acquire a divine spark, and what's more, it was the divine spark of a demigod. If it had been the divine spark of a full god, I wouldn't have been able to absorb and fuse with it at all. The War God laughed calmly. Linley suddenly began to understand. There were certain preconditions for one to fuse with a divine spark. Someone who had not yet become a deity probably would only be able to fuse with a demigod's divine spark. Why did those experts from other planes descend to the Yulon continent and engage in battle here? Linley immediately asked. The War God glanced at Linley. For now, you don't need to know about this. Clearly, the War God didn't wish to tell Linley. Linley had no choice but to remain silent. The Necropolis of the Gods will be opened once every 1,000 years. Each time it is opened, those who have received acknowledgement and permission from us deities are permitted to enter the Necropolis of the Gods and engage in exploration. The War God glanced at Linley. But I must tell you, the Necropolis of the Gods is extremely dangerous. Has anyone ever succeeded? Linley asked. Of course. The War God said with certainty. But only one person. And the funny thing was, as soon as he acquired a demigod divine spark and broke through, he immediately headed off to the higher planes. Linley secretly laughed. To become a deity was extremely hard. But wouldn't it be so much simpler to just acquire a divine spark from within the Necropolis of the Gods and then fuse it? No wonder so many of the lucky survivors of the past had decided to remain hidden here in the Yulon continent. After all, it was virtually impossible for a saint to acquire a divine spark in the higher planes. Lord War God, are there any differences between becoming a deity through fusing with a divine spark and becoming a deity through personal understandings and breakthroughs? Linley asked. The war god nodded and sighed. There are. After absorbing and fusing with the divine spark, one's future training becomes much more difficult. After all, the divine spark you fused with wasn't one which had naturally descended upon you and formed within your soul. There are qualitative differences. Linley nodded. In his heart, Linley deeply appreciated the fact that the war god had provided him with this important piece of information. But despite that, so what? Linley, if I placed a divine spark in front of you and told you that if you fused with it, you would become a demigod, with the price being that your future training would be slower and more difficult, would you be willing to fuse with it? The war god looked at Linley. Linley was startled. Indeed. If a demigod's divine spark was placed in front of him, which represented the chance to become a deity, despite knowing that one's future training would become more difficult, most likely, many people would choose to immediately absorb and fuse with the divine spark. Enough. Linley, if there's nothing else, you can leave now. The war god said calmly. Linley hurriedly said. Lord War God, in a few days, I plan to go to the anarchic lands. My little brother Warden will probably remain in the imperial capital. I am worried that the forces of the Radiant Church will threaten my little brother. Don't worry. The imperial capital is not a place where the Radiant Church can act as they please. The war god said calmly. Hearing these words from the war god, Linley felt calmer. Lord War God, the current emperor, Johann, Linley didn't even finish speaking before the war god frowned and said, I gave you my talisman. Just show it to Johann, and he will know that it represents my authority. Each generation of emperors knows this. Linley was startled. The talisman with the word war on it which the war god had bequeathed unto him previously actually had this function as well? The war god glanced coldly at Linley. But you had better not use the talisman too wildly. If you throw the empire into a state of chaos, then you will be the one to fix it? Oh, right. When you go to the anarchic lands, there is a person you must remember not to offend. Who? Linley was startled. The anarchic lands didn't have any famous experts, right? The war god said calmly, one of the 5 prime saints lives in the anarchic lands. His name is Desri Des-I-Li. He trains in the laws of light. His power is on par with Fane's. Linley immediately memorized this name. Someone who was on par with Fane was a person who was only a step away from becoming a deity. Enough. You can leave now. The war god said calmly. Linley immediately bowed, then turned, and prepared to leave. Remember to treat with kindness that magical beast of yours, Bibi. The war god said with a sudden sigh. Shocked, Linley turned his head to stare at the war god. Linley wasn't surprised that the war god knew of Bibi's existence, but why had the war god just told him to treat Bibi well? The war god paid no more attention to Linley. With one step, his scarlet hair flowing around him, he entered that hovering ball of fire once more and returned to his training. Bibi. Linley actually felt that the war god was being a bit too nice to him. Whether it was with regards to Warden's wedding, or telling him so many things on this visit, Linley now felt that this had to do with Bibi. Bibi. Linley still remembered how Bibi had told him that he came from a clan known as the Baruch clan. Bibi's power is terrifying, and his rate of growth is astonishing as well. And he comes from the Baruch clan. Now, the war god says, Linley suddenly began to question Bibi's identity. The imperial capital of Chan. The imperial palace. Within the flower gardens. Emperor Johann was in a wonderful mood. He leisurely strolled about in his flower gardens, enjoying the sight of all sorts of beautiful flowers. With Linley no longer looking into Reynolds' affair, he naturally felt much more relaxed. Your Imperial Majesty, someone is flying over. His personal attendant suddenly said. Someone was flying over? A saint-level expert. Emperor Johann immediately turned to look. In the skies, he saw a blue-robed Linley soaring in his direction. In the blink of an eye, Linley arrived in the flower gardens. "Oh, so it is Master Linley." A smile immediately blossomed on Emperor Johan's face. "Is there something you need, Master Linley?" Linley glanced at the palace attendant. "Leave for now," Emperor Johann said to his nearby attendant, who immediately walked far into the distance. Now there was only Linley and Emperor Johann, with no one else nearby. Even the guards were over 100 meters away. Linley stared emotionlessly at Emperor Johann. Stared at by Linley in such a manner, Emperor Johann began to feel puzzled and uneasy. Could it be that Linley had discovered that Reynolds' death had to do with Julin? "Emperor Johann, do you still believe that you've told me the complete truth regarding Reynolds dying in battle?" Linley stared at Emperor Johann. Emperor Johann's heart immediately plummeted. He felt as though he had suddenly fallen into a bottomless abyss. Emperor Johann was no fool. Hearing Linley's words, he naturally could guess that Linley perhaps already knew everything. "Linley, that was the report that came from the military. It shouldn't be fake," Emperor Johann said seriously. The meaning of his words were clear. Even if the information was wrong, it was the fault of the military reporters, and didn't have anything to do with him, Johann. Linley glanced at Emperor Johann. "Emperor Johann, based on what I have learned, my dear friend Reynolds had led a group of knights in a scouting trip, but had been pursued by the forces of the Rohald Empire to the walls of the city of Neil. The pursuing forces of the Rohald Empire numbered only 300. But at that time, Prince Julin actually ordered the soldiers to stay put and guard the city from inside, out of fear." The look on Johann's face changed. Faced with 300 people, why would a garrison of tens of thousands of soldiers have to stand their ground inside the city of Neil? Linley's voice grew even colder. "My brother, Reynolds, and his dozens of subordinates were shouting for the gates to be opened from the base of the walls. But Prince Julin actually ordered that the gates were to remain shut. And thus like that, Reynolds and his men lost their lives, for no purpose whatsoever." Linley stared coldly at Johann. "Emperor Johann, tell me, how should we resolve this affair?" Emperor Johann already knew that there was no way to favorably resolve this situation. He didn't dare to lie or to equivocate. In front of a peak stage saint, would excuses be of any use? Johann's face turned steely. "Julin, that bastard." Johann looked at Linley with fury in his eyes. "Master Linley, we had no idea that Julin actually did something like this. He has brought utter shame upon our empire. Master Linley, please don't worry. We guarantee you that we will definitely take severe actions to censure him. Tomorrow, no, immediately, we shall send our senior ministers to go to the Southeast Administrative Province and strictly investigate this matter. We definitely will not let off anyone who committed any major crimes with a light punishment." Linley had seen through Johann's little ploy from the very beginning. Johann would send someone? Even if they discovered anything, they wouldn't find Prince Julin guilty of any serious crime. "Your Imperial Majesty, no need to trouble yourself. Whoever caused my brother to die, I shall make them die." Linley's voice was cold and fierce, causing Johann's heart to quiver. But Emperor Johann was frantic as well. Linley was actually saying he was going to directly kill Julin. He was going to go kill Johann's brother? He, Johann, only had a single brother. What was Reynolds? Nothing more than a common noble. If he died, he died. How could Reynolds' life compare to Johann's brother's life? "Linley, the Empire has our imperial laws," Emperor Johann said in a cold voice. For his little brother's sake, he had decided to try and face Linley head-on for once. Linley looked at Emperor Johann. With a cold, calm voice, he said, "Dare I ask, according to military law, what is the punishment for someone who is afraid to do battle against an enemy of just 300 soldiers, and even stands by and does nothing as his own soldiers are slaughtered?" "The penalty is indeed death." Johann nodded. However, an investigation is still needed to find out exactly what happened. Linley glanced at Johann. What happened is quite clear. I've only come to inform you of what I am going to do. Johann, do not press your luck. Do not think you can use worldly laws to bind and restrict me. Saint-level experts were indeed free of worldly laws and restrictions. Emperor Johann stared at Linley. Suddenly, he said in a soft, begging voice, Linley, you have a little brother as well. You should understand how I feel. Ha ha, Linley laughed loudly. Your Imperial Majesty, it seems you are suggesting that so long as one has an older brother, then they can kill any of my brothers with impunity, and then have their older brother say to me, you have a little brother as well? And then let me pardon their little brother. Linley's face was so cold, it seemed like a layer of frost was covering it. How laughable! It was indeed laughable. Someone had killed his bro, and now was trying to stir up sympathy by talking about the relationship between older and younger brothers. Linley, you, Emperor Johann was furious. Johann, I hope that you won't let yourself act rashly. Otherwise, with a flip of his hand, Linley retrieved the scarlet talisman which the war god had given him. Emperor Johann, upon seeing the talisman in Linley's hands, seemed to have had a bucket of ice water poured onto his head. His entire body began to shake. The war god's talisman. Johann stared disbelievingly at the talisman. After the founding of the O'Brien Empire, the war god, O'Brien, had abdicated and given the throne to his son, who had passed it down over time to future generations. Every generation of emperors knew that the war god's talisman represented the war god himself. Whosoever held this war god's talisman even had the power to force the emperor to abdicate. Naturally, very few people were in possession of the war god's talisman, and those people wouldn't dare to falsify an order from the war god. It's good that you recognize the war god's talisman. Linley looked calmly at Emperor Johann. Emperor Johann, I don't care about the fact that you don't handle affairs with impartiality. I, Linley, am not the sort of person to consider myself the epitome of honor and righteousness. However, don't try to put on any airs around me and restrict me. I won't offend others, but I don't wish for others to offend me either. Also, I do not wish to see you scheme against or act against the Dunstan clan, the clan of my friend Reynolds. Linley said calmly. And then, Linley immediately took to the air and flew off towards the east. Johann watched as Linley flew eastwards. He knew that Linley was heading to the southeast administrative province to go kill his younger brother. But did he dare to stop him? Right now, Johann didn't even dare to try and verbally argue with Linley. He was the emperor, true. But who had given him his authority? The war god. A single word from the war god could force him to abdicate. By then, he, Johann, wouldn't have any authority at all. The loss of his younger brother's life, or the loss of his imperial power, which was more important? Johann chose himself. The wind blew with dreary force as Linley flew at high speed towards the southeast administrative province. At this time, a black light suddenly flew towards him at high speed from the imperial capital, soon reaching Linley's side. It was Bibi. Boss, how'd it go? Bibi asked. Although Johann dotes on his little brother, he values his imperial power even more. I didn't have to say anything. All I did was take out the war god's talisman, and he no longer dared to make a sound. Linley chuckled. Worldly power? That was nothing more than secondary, and bequeathed upon you by others at that. Only true personal power, developed by training, was truly effective. No wonder the war god didn't want to be emperor, but instead spent his time in quiet training. Linley and Bibi, the man and the magical beast, flew east at high speed, and in the blink of an eye disappeared into the eastern horizon. Book 9, His Fame Shakes the World, Chapter 42, The Southeast Administrative Province. Emperor Johann lay down on a bench within the imperial palace's flower gardens, feeling utterly powerless. A weak, pale look was on his face. His eyes were closed, and he was silent. The only thing the nearby palace attendant could do was to carefully take care of him. The palace attendant was very puzzled. Just then, His Imperial Majesty was in a fine mood. But after chatting a while with Master Linley, he became like this. Emperor Johann's eyes suddenly opened. Transmit this decree. Marquis Jeff is to go to the Central Administrative Province and join with the Jacques Legion. Let Legion Commander Lace arrange a relaxed assignment for him. Unless there are special circumstances, Marquis Jeff is not to be permitted to return to the imperial capital. Emperor Johann said calmly. He truly did not wish to see Marquis Jeff again. Whenever he saw Marquis Jeff, he would be reminded of Prince Julien. The event which occurred today was the deepest humiliation in Emperor Johann's heart. But Emperor Johann knew that there was nothing he could do about it. All he could do was accept it. Although the palace attendant was puzzled by the emperor's orders, he still said respectfully, "Yes, Your Imperial Majesty." Emperor Johann sat back down on his seat. Suddenly, he seemed to have become much older. From the imperial capital to the southeast administrative province, even flying at high speed in a straight line, over 2,000 kilometers had to be traversed. In mid-flight, the impatient Linley transformed into his full dragon form, making haste towards the southeast at top speed. When Linley had left the imperial capital, the sun had already sunk down to and reached the edges of the eastern horizon. When Linley arrived at the provincial capital of the southeast administrative province, the entire world had begun to grow dim, and the countless commoners had begun to sit down in their homes and prepare for dinner. Whoosh! While flying towards the top of provincial capital in his dragon form, Linley suddenly spread out his spiritual energy, easily encapsulating that luxurious castle in the center of the city within it. Prince Julien was living there. Boss. Should I handle it? Bibi was flying side by side with Linley. No. Whenever Linley thought of his bro, Reynolds, the flames of fury in his heart burned ever hotter. Although he had flown here at high speed, Linley still felt that this trip had been a long one. Too long. Linley's dark golden eyes had turned slightly bloodshot. Julien. Linley ground his teeth and said in a low voice, and then his dark golden eyes became all the more grim and callous. Thousands of guards were currently on patrol outside the administrator's castle of the Southeast Administrative Province's provincial capital. There were many beautiful maids and servants walking about the castle as well. Within one quiet, secluded room within the castle, behind a hazy gauze screen, the sound of low panting. A coquettish voice moaning non-stop. Two bodies intertwined with each other. After a long moment, a low growl. And then, the room returned to utter silence. Your Imperial Highness. A soft, sweet voice. Baby, you really are bewitching. You are much better than my wife. Prince Julien opened the gauze screen, then put on his long robe and left the bed. Baby, rest here. I'll order someone to bring you food. Thank you, Your Imperial Highness. The woman behind the gauze screen had jade hair which cascaded down like a waterfall, and her eyes seemed utterly bewitching. A hint of a satisfied smile was on the corner of Prince Julien's face. He was very satisfied with his life. What was so good about being an emperor? As a prince, he had as many servants as he wished and as many women as he wished. Wasn't this sort of life even better than that of a god's? That big brother of mine. Geez. All I did was cause that Reynolds to die, but he lectured and berated me. Prince Julien pursed his lips disdainfully. His life was extremely valuable. If a common noble died, he died. What was the big deal about it? Prince Julien's absolute bottom line was this: anything which might threaten his life, no matter how small, had to be stopped. Prince Julien walked out of the room, feeling satisfied. Your Imperial Highness. The two female attendants outside the room said respectfully. Prince Julin gently stroked the face of one of the female attendants. Laughing lightly, he said, "Baby, tonight, you can come serve me." "Yes, Your Imperial Highness." A hint of joy actually appeared on that female attendant's face. Just as Prince Julin was feeling that his life was simply too perfect, a cold voice rang out from the skies above, covering the entire castle. "Prince Julin, are you enjoying your life?" That voice was filled with resentment and hatred, causing Prince Julin to suddenly tremble. "Who is it?" The castle guards all raised their weapons and roared angrily. "Up above." "Ah! It is a demon." A guard saw Linley standing in mid-air. Prince Julin's heart was filled with terror and fear. He didn't know who had come to act against him. The people whom Prince Julin had offended were all people who were inferior in status to him. Prince Julin knew very well that some powerful experts were not to be offended. So who was this? Prince Julin raised his head high, and his face turned ashen in terror. Linley was currently standing in mid-air above Prince Julin's residence. In full dragon form, Linley was surrounded by a dense fog of azurish black battle chi, which swirled and roiled about him. Linley did indeed look like a demon from the abyss. His dark golden eyes were staring down at Prince Julin. All Linley had done was to use his spiritual energy to search and investigate. After hearing Prince Julin's words to the two female attendants, he knew that this person was indeed Prince Julin. Linley's body suddenly descended, and a terrifying surge of energy blasted out in every direction. Boom! The nearby buildings were all blown apart by this terrifying blast of force. Linley landed heavily on the ground, and the stone floor of the residence instantly cracked and shattered, as though it had been struck by a massive falling boulder. "Milord, who are you?" Prince Julin squeezed out a smile, appearing to be incredibly humble. The man in front of him was a saint. Prince Julin was absolutely certain of this. Prince Julin deeply cared about his life, so he never offended any saints. "Milord, is there perhaps some mistake? Why have you sought me out?" Prince Julin forcibly maintained his smile, but just at this time, from afar, a guard's voice could be heard. "Your Imperial Highness, that person is Master Linley. I went to the Imperial capital and watched his duel with Lord Hatesun." Many people had watched the duel between Linley and Hatesun. People from the Southeast Administrative Province had gone as well. Naturally, that guard recognized Linley. Prince Julin hadn't gone. To Prince Julin, watching experts fight wasn't as interesting as playing around with some beautiful women. It was fortunate for him that he was the Emperor's younger brother, because otherwise, in a country like the O'Brien Empire, where people worshipped experts and valued training and personal strength, his life would have been terrible. Master Linley. Prince Julin's heart shook. What he had feared the most had come. Previously, at Neil City, he had caused Reynolds' death. After Prince Julin had discovered the relationship between Linley and Reynolds, he was filled with regret, but it was too late. What the hell did my big brother do? Didn't he say that Linley didn't know that this affair had something to do with me? Prince Julin began to curse Johann in his heart. Meanwhile, Linley just stared at Prince Julin. His dear brother, Reynolds, had died because this Julin had extinguished Reynolds' last chance at life due to his own cowardice. His dear brother didn't have to die. "Do you know why I have come?" Linley was unable to restrain his fury any longer. "Ah! So it is Master Linley," Prince Julin hurriedly said. "It is Julin's honor to be able to welcome you here, Master. But I actually do not know why you have come here, Master." By now, groups of people had clustered around him, watching. There were many of Prince Julin's women, some of his children, and many guards and female attendants. They all watched with terror. Even the two experts of the 9th rank who were Prince Julin's special guests stood far away, their hearts filled with terror. "Master Linley, if there's anything you want, please speak calmly." I think, Master, you must have some sort of misunderstanding about His Imperial Highness. The caretaker of the castle said from the side in a trembling voice. Linley turned back to glance at the caretaker, whose face instantly turned white. Misunderstanding. Linley walked towards Prince Julin, one step at a time. Cold sweat poured from Prince Julin's forehead. He was so frightened that not a hint of blood could be seen in his face. Linley's lips quirked upwards, revealing a terrifying smile. Whoosh! Linley's ferocious black draconic tail suddenly moved, wrapping around Prince Julin's body and constricting him like a whip. Ah! An shrill scream burst out from Prince Julin's throat, sounding like a woman being molested. Linley's dark golden eyes stared remorselessly at Prince Julin. Why are you screaming? I haven't even used any force, but you are already screaming. If I were to use force. Spare me, Master Linley, spare me. Prince Julin said, terror-stricken. Spare you. Linley's voice suddenly turned into a guttural growl. Me, spare you? What about my brother Reynolds? Who spared his life? Linley's black draconic tail, radiating a cold light, began to squeeze while lifting Prince Julin into the air. Prince Julin was constricted and lifted into the air by this draconic tail, which was as thick as a strong man's arm. As the tail began to tremble slightly, Prince Julin began to howl in terror. Ah! Slash! Fresh blood began to dye Prince Julin's clothes red. Stop! Many of the loyal guards raised their weapons from afar and howled angrily. They didn't dare to charge forwards, but they did dare to at least shout. F***ck off. Linley frowned, his heart filled with fury. Boom. A terrifying surge of energy erupted from Linley, blasting out in every direction. All of the surrounding guards and female attendants were sent flying. Some unlucky guards ended up smashing into walls head first, with their brains splattering. Others fell to the ground and were heavily injured. In the blink of an eye, aside from Linley and Prince Julin, not a single person was still on his or her feet. The boss has really gone crazy. BB watched quietly from midair. Linley retracted his gaze from the surrounding people, turning to stare at the bloody-faced Prince Julin. Julin, don't worry. I'll let you live for a bit longer, I'll let you have the sensation of a slow death. Linley's voice was very soft, but it filled Prince Julin with the utmost fear. Master, please spare me. I'll do anything you want, give you anything you want, as long as I am capable, anything is fine, but the important thing, don't kill me. Prince Julin still thought that he could escape from this situation alive. Linley didn't pay any attention to Prince Julin's squabbling. The only thing in his mind was the smile of his fourth bro, Reynolds. That adorable youngster, so dissolute and lazy, had spent 10 days and 10 nights waiting for him in a blizzard when he had been carving awakening from the dream. Crunch. A cringe-inducing sound could be heard from Prince Julin's entire body. His waist had suddenly become compacted to the waist of a slender young lady. Prince Julin's face was utterly red. He wasn't able to say a single sentence, and fresh blood was leaking forward from his mouth. Spare, spare, Prince Julin stared at Linley in terror. The distant serving women and attendants all watched with terror as Prince Julin's waist visibly became smaller and smaller. Crunch. Yet another bone-splintering sound could be heard. Blood was pouring forth from Prince Julin's mouth, and his face had turned the color of purple jam. The internal organs in his body had been squeezed to the point of rupture. This sort of pain made Prince Julin wish he could die. You can't die so fast. Prince Julin's endurance was far weaker than that of Clades, from all those years ago. Suddenly, Linley's draconic tail loosened and retracted. That nearly dead Prince Julin fell to the ground. Prince Julin let out a sigh of relief, but before he even hit the ground. Bam! Linley's right leg kicked viciously against Prince Julin's body. Prince Julin's eyes turned round from utter terror. Prince Julin's body was sent flying from this kick, and he smashed hard against a distant wall. That thick, sturdy wall was actually shattered by the collision. As for Prince Julin, his weak, fragile body instantly disintegrated into a pile of mud like flesh and bone, strewn everywhere. Fourth bro, don't worry. I won't spare a single one of those people who caused you to die. Linley said softly to himself. A hint of moisture could be seen in those dark golden eyes. Linley turned to look at Bibi in mid-air. Let's go. We're heading to Neil City. Whoosh. Linley rose straight into the air, flying towards the southeast at high speed with Bibi by his side. The thousands of people in the area below were utterly, deathly silent. Only, Prince Julin's utterly disintegrated corpse was so eye-catching and so frightful to behold. Book 9, His Fame Shakes the World, Chapter 43, The Corpse. If Reynolds was alive, he wanted to see him. If Reynolds was dead, he wanted to see Reynolds' corpse. From Yale, Linley had learned that Reynolds' corpse had actually been taken away by the enemy. On this trip, no matter what, he had to bring his friend's corpse back. However, before that, Linley had to pay a visit to Neil City. After all, the soldiers of Neil City should have known exactly what happened on the day Reynolds was killed. Boss, don't be too heartbroken. Bibi said softly. Linley stared at the distant horizon, then turned to glance at Bibi, forcing out a smile. Bibi, I'm fine. But it was hard to make out any expressions on the face of the dragon-formed Linley. All that could be seen was the corners of his lips curving slightly. After flying for a while, the distant Neil City appeared in the desolate landscape. We're arriving. The temperature around Linley suddenly dropped by a level. The army of the O'Brien Empire was currently camped a few dozen kilometers outside Neil City. 10 kilometers away, facing them, was the army of the Rohald Empire. The two armies stared at each other. After Prince Julin had left the city, the Golden Flame Legion had quickly exacted revenge for Reynolds. But the Rohald Empire had been prepared already, and they wouldn't lower their heads either. The two armies had engaged in multiple engagements, with tens of thousands of casualties. They were now at a temporary halt, but the next attack could come at any moment. Right now, the garrison of Neil City was fairly relaxed. After all, there was an army of tens of thousands in front of them. Man, that prince whatever was such a coward. He let the enemy make it all the way to our walls, and didn't even let us go out. A couple of garrison guards were huddled together in a corner of the walls, chatting idly. What a tragedy! Senior Captain Reynolds died such an unjust death, and even his corpse was taken away. The Golden Flame Legion was, without question, an extremely elite legion. What happened last time at the walls of Neil City was, without a doubt, a mark of shame for the entire Golden Flame Legion. But the military commanders at that time hadn't dared to disobey the orders of Prince Julin. Who are you? Suddenly, terrified. Angry shouts could be heard from outside. One soldier after another stopped resting in their cubbyholes and came out, but when they saw the dragon-formed person standing in mid-air, wrapped within a cocoon of azurish black mist, they were all stunned. They were elite soldiers who constantly lived on the line between life and death. But when they saw this expert standing in mid-air, they understood that this aberration was definitely a saint-level expert. These soldiers didn't have any ability to fight against him at all. You are Master Linley. Suddenly, a military officer whispered these words. The eyes of the surrounding elite soldiers suddenly lit up. Linley's dragon-formed appearance had become the stuff of legends. Those elite warriors carefully inspected the cloud-shrouded Linley's appearance. Indeed, he looked very much like how the legends said he did. It is I. A dark whisper drifted out from within that azurish black mist. Master Linley. A genius magus. A grand master sculptor. A peak stage saint. The pride of the entire O'Brien Empire, countless people in the empire worshipped Linley. After realizing that this aberration was Linley, the surrounding warriors actually began to feel that Linley's transformation was extremely manly and very ferocious. These were valiant warriors indeed. "Master Linley, if there is anything you need, please just ask us," the military officer hurriedly said. "A while ago, a group of your scouts were encountered and attacked by the Rohald Empire's forces, and were chased all the way to the city walls. The senior captain of that group was named Reynolds, correct?" Linley's voice was hoarse. The military officer said, "Yes, Master Linley." All of the surrounding soldiers felt a deep sense of humiliation. Even Master Linley had learned of the Golden Flame Legion's shame. All of them felt extremely awkward and embarrassed. "Where is Reynolds' corpse?" Linley asked. "Master Linley, Lord Reynolds' corpse was taken away by the enemies." The military officer's face was turning a bit green. He truly felt ashamed. Before their very eyes, 300 people had not only killed Reynolds and his men, they had even taken away Reynolds' corpse. Linley asked, "Who here personally witnessed what had happened on that day?" Many people looked at each other. These people had only heard of what happened to Reynolds. That squad of soldiers who had been on the walls and had personally witnessed what had happened had all been punished and sent to the front lines to do battle with the enemies. Seeing the expression on their faces, Linley frowned. I witnessed it?" An ancient-sounding voice rang out from behind. All of the soldiers parted, allowing a lavishly dressed old man walk over. This old man was the governor of Neil City. "Lord Governor." All the surrounding soldiers bowed respectfully. Staring at Linley and the azurish black cloud surrounding him, the city governor sighed secretly. As the city governor of a border city like Neil City, how could he possibly be a soft, spineless person? At that time, he had been accompanying Prince Julin. When he had seen Reynolds and the others being pursued, he was just about to order his men to go rescue them. But at that time, Prince Julin's attitude clearly showed that he would not permit anyone to go outside. They had to stand their ground inside the walls. The city governor was already quite old, and he had sons and grandsons. He didn't dare to disobey the order of Prince Julin. "You are the city governor of Neil City? Good. Clearly explain to me what happened that day when Reynolds was pursued here and killed," Linley said coldly. The city governor nodded. "When Reynolds and his men fled here, they had all been wounded. There was an arrow sticking out from Reynolds' shoulders. When they reached the walls, 10 or so experts of the enemy came rushing over, ignoring the arrows of the garrison troops as they immediately began to slaughter Reynolds and the others. Reynolds was slashed to death by a blow to his chest, and then the leader of the enemy forces took him away." Linley secretly nodded to himself. The Dawson conglomerate's intelligence was indeed accurate. The leader of the enemies. "Do you know where he is?" Linley stared at the city governor of Neil. "I must find and reclaim Reynolds' corpse." The city governor of Neil nodded. "Right now, the legions of the Rohald Empire are currently in a deadlock against our legion. They are located a few dozen kilometers outside of Neil City. I imagine their leader is there as well." "Right, the leader should be a warrior of the 8th rank." "Oh." Linley turned to stare towards the south. He could clearly smell the scent of battle and blood in that direction. The bloody scent created by the deaths of tens of thousands was extremely thick. "BB, let's go." Boom. A terrifying sonic boom could be heard as Linley and BB, the man and the magical beast, slashed through the air, disappearing into the southern horizons. Seeing this, the city governor of Neil had a hint of excitement on his face. "Looks like those bastards of the Rohald Empire are in for it now." The city governor of Neil immediately descended from the walls and led a small squad out of the city into the direction of the Golden Flame Legion's camp. The two armies of the two empires stared at each other. Within the central battlefield, many soldiers were carting away the corpses of their own people. At a time like this, the two legions had quite conscientiously paused their battle. The corpses were carried away, one after the other. At this time, the already faintly red earth was stained even more crimson, and the stench of blood had attracted quite a few locusts. In the camp of the army of the Rohalt empires, their military flag was gently waving in the breeze. Multiple squads were out on patrol. Suddenly, an azurish black cloud appeared in the air above the Rohalt empire's camp. Not here. Linley's spiritual energy had encompassed the entire military camp, but he couldn't find Reynolds' corpse. Senior Captain Hugh Houquet was currently in his tent, taking large gulps of strong liquor. He was in a wonderful mood. Hugh was certain that, after this battle, he would definitely be promoted. At the very least, I will be promoted to Deputy Legion Commander. Hugh mused to himself. But right at this moment, a powerful force suddenly ripped apart his sturdy tent. Hugh was shocked. What on earth? Have the enemies broken into our camp? While thinking this, Hugh quickly rushed out, but when he did, he felt the wild, howling wind, so powerful that he couldn't even stand straight. Staring at his surroundings, Hugh's face turned pale. He saw countless gusts of energy swirling about throughout the Rohalt Empire's camp, and all of the soldiers found it hard to stand stable. After a while, the wild wind disappeared. All of the military officers of the Rohalt Empire are to report to the central gathering location. Quickly. A calm voice rang out from the sky. Everyone craned their heads upwards. They saw that constantly flowing azurish black mist, and within that mist, they could vaguely see the form of a terrifying creature. I am Legion Commander Shastra Shasite of the Rohalt Empire's Right Lite Legion. Might I ask why you have come here, esteemed expert? Legion Commander Shastra said respectfully. From the power the man had just displayed, Shastra knew that this was a terrifyingly powerful expert with the ability to destroy this entire legion. The azurish black mist was drawn closer to Linley's body, allowing the people below to clearly see what Linley looked like. Freak. Demon. Many soldiers let out quiet cries of fear. Linley's body landed heavily on the ground, causing it to shake and cracks to appear. Linley's draconic tail swished about, gouging deep holes into the ground wherever it passed. Dare I ask, esteemed expert, are you Master Linley? Shastra said respectfully. Linley glanced at Shastra. The man was quite experienced, and lived up to being a Legion commander. After Linley had become famous, news about his dragon-formed appearance had been widely spread as well. It is I. Linley said calmly. The countless surrounding soldiers immediately felt a terrifying sense of pressure. They had all heard of how powerful Linley was, but Linley belonged to the O'Brien Empire's side. Right now, they were currently engaged in battle against the O'Brien Empire. Master Linley, can it be that you are going to violate the laws of war? As a saint-level expert, are you also going to participate in this battle? Shastra said in a voice that was neither humble nor offensive. When two empires engaged in battle, unless it was a do-or-die final battle, saint-level experts generally were not permitted to participate. Linley glanced at him coldly. I dislike others threatening me. Shastra immediately no longer dared to make a sound. If Linley were to go wild, he was truly capable of annihilating this entire army. He didn't have any recourse. Speak. A while ago, you sent some people out on ambush and chased a scouting party of the O'Brien Empire to the city of Neil. Who was the leader of that squad of 300? Linley said coldly. When he said this, virtually all the surrounding soldiers turned to stare at the nearby Hugh. Hugh's body quivered. No one needed to say anything. Linley turned to look at Hugh as well, and Hugh immediately said respectfully, Master Linley, a while ago, I did indeed lead my troops to kill a large squad and utterly annihilated them in the end. Utterly annihilated. Hearing these words, the muscles beneath Linley's eyes twitched once. Linley stared at Hugh, his cold gaze causing Hugh to feel as though he had suddenly sunk into a frozen land of ice. I heard that you not only killed all the people in that squad, you also brought back the corpse of the senior captain. It is true. A look of arrogance appeared on Hugh's face. As far as Hugh was concerned, this was something worth being proud of. Linley's heart shook. The man in front of him had admitted to it, but the military camp didn't have Reynolds' corpse within it. Could it be that Reynolds' corpse had already been destroyed? When he thought of this possibility, the angry flames in Linley's heart burned even hotter. With a flicker, Linley appeared in front of Hugh. Ah! Hugh didn't have the chance to run away. Stretching out one arm, Linley's powerful right hand clutched around Hugh's throat, lifting Hugh into the air. Linley's dark golden eyes stared death at Hugh. Do you know? The name of that senior captain was Reynolds. He was a friend for life of myself, Linley. Linley ground his teeth. The surrounding soldiers now all understood why Linley had come and done such a thing. Hugh's eyes were filled with shocked understanding as well. At the same time, he could sense that the force Linley was exerting around his throat was increasing. His face turning red, he forced out one word after another with difficulty. No, that Reynolds, he didn't die. Linley was stunned. His hand loosened, and Hugh collapsed to the ground. Hugh immediately held his throat in his hands and began to cough. Book 9, His Fame Shakes the World, Chapter 44, Enslaved. Fourth bro didn't die. Stunned, Linley blurted these words out, but then he immediately came to himself. Did you just say that Reynolds didn't die? Right now, Linley's heart was thumping madly. Shock, joy, worry, disbelief, excitement, fear, all sorts of emotions were intermixed in Linley's chest. Right now, the only thing Linley could do was to stare expectantly at this military officer of the Rohald Empire in front of him. Holding his throat, Hugh frantically said in fear, "It is true. He didn't die. He really didn't die. Hugh, when you reported your military success, didn't you say that the senior captain you captured had died already?" The nearby legion commander, Shastra, was frowning. Lying to a saint was extremely foolish. Shastra thought that Hugh was perhaps concocting a lie out of fear. Linley stared at Hugh as well. He truly hoped that Hugh wasn't lying. Speak, now. Linley stared at Hugh. Every single person in the now chaotic army camp was staring at Hugh. Hugh straightened his body, then hurriedly explained, "Master Linley, I truly am not lying. Back then, when I recovered that senior captain's corpse, that is, Reynolds' corpse, I carried the body myself. But afterwards, I discovered that this corpse suddenly moved. Only then did I realize that he hadn't died." Linley's heart tightened. An awkward look appeared on Hugh's face. "Master Linley, this Reynolds was extremely handsome, and he was a noble, valuable magus. Based on the magic he used when my comrades and I were chasing him, he should most likely be a magus of the 7th rank. A handsome young magus of the 7th rank is extremely valuable on the slave market." Hearing this, Linley instantly understood. The surrounding military officers all understood as well. In times of war, there would often be large numbers of slaves sold to slave trading organizations. The army was often on good terms with these organizations, and a handsome young magus of the 7th rank would definitely be a valuable commodity. A magus of the 7th rank was a high and mighty figure. To cause a magus like this to become a slave was something which some noble ladies truly liked. They would be willing to pay enormous sums of money to purchase such a slave. The price one would get from selling such a magus of the 7th rank would probably be far greater than any reward money which Hugh would have received from the army. "Are you saying that you sold Reynolds to a slave trading organization?" Linley asked. "Right," Hugh said in terror. He now knew that Reynolds was Master Linley's bosom friend. How badly was Reynolds injured? Linley said with concern. From the reports he had heard, Reynolds had suffered life-threatening wounds. Linley was worried about him. Hugh said with absolute certainty, "Master Linley, don't worry. When I took Reynolds back, I immediately invited healers to come treat him. And then, after he was sold to the slave trading organization, those slave traders definitely wouldn't let such a valuable commodity die." Valuable commodity? In his heart, Linley was worried about his friend. Reynolds had fallen to the point of becoming a slave? "Let's go. You will come with me to find that slave trading organization. You should know where it is, right?" Linley grabbed Hugh by his clothes, and Hugh hurriedly said, "Yes, this humble one remembers it very clearly." The nearby Shastra snapped, "Hugh, from today onwards, you are to accompany Master Linley. Whatever Master Linley wishes you to do, you must obey." Shastra looked at Linley and said apologetically, "Master Linley, our deepest apologies. I hope you won't be too upset with us." Shastra truly didn't have any other options. Generally speaking, in times of war, both sides wouldn't dare to get the family and friends of saints involved. After all, if a saint was to go berserk, that would be quite terrifying. In the annals of history, there had been more than a few cases of a saint going berserk and killing tens of thousands of soldiers. However, generally speaking, saints were high and mighty people who stood above the fray. So long as you didn't offend them, they wouldn't stoop to causing troubles with ordinary people. Linley glanced at Shastra, then snatched Hugh up. "Let's go." He suddenly rose into the air, and then flew alongside Bibi towards the south. Watching Linley fly away, the entire military camp let out a collective sigh of relief. Facing such a powerful saint, all of the warriors present truly didn't have anything they could do. "Commanders, go now and manage your subordinates. I'm worried that the Golden Flame Legion will seize this opportunity to launch a sneak attack." Seeing how disorderly and dispirited the army camp was, Shastra couldn't help but feel worried. After all, their army was already in a state of disorder, and the spirit of the army had already been suppressed by Linley. Shastra's prediction was correct. Not too long afterwards, the Golden Flame Legion once more began their ferocious assault. Within a border city within the Rohalt Empire. Hugh in hand, Linley descended upon a seemingly unremarkable estate, which had a number of exquisitely dressed guards within. Whoosh! A sudden gust of wind came out of nowhere. Linley, now in human form again, appeared on the ground with Hugh in his clutches. Linley was no longer as grief-stricken and furious as he had been at the beginning, when he was preparing to avenge his brother's death. He was much calmer, now. No matter what, at least his fourth bro was still alive. "Old White Yte! Old White!" Hugh immediately began to yell at the top of his lungs as soon as he landed. "Who are you guys?" Old White didn't come out, but quickly, over 10 guards appeared in a circle around him, all of whom had their weapons at the ready, prepared to attack at any moment. Only then did a silver-haired old man in a gentleman's suit appear from a side door. Seeing Hugh, the silver-haired old man laughed loudly. "Oh, so it is my dear Hugh. Why are you in such a rush, to the point of charging straight in?" "Hugh, who is this?" The old gentleman named White had very sharp eyes. He instantly could tell that this man dressed in a black robe was quite extraordinary. After returning to human form, Linley hadn't changed his clothes, and so his pants were ripped and torn. Linley frowned, glancing coldly at this old White. "Old White, this is Master Linley," Hugh said hurriedly. "Master Linley." Old White was startled, and then a look of shock appeared on his face. "Could it be that this is the dragon blood warrior of the O'Brien Empire, Master Linley?" Hugh hurriedly nodded. "I was flown over here by Master Linley." Old White didn't dare to believe it. He was nothing more than a local supervisor for his slave trading organization. How could he be worth Master Linley, one of the towering figures of the Yulon continent, to come and visit him? "Old White," Linley looked at Old White. "Master Linley." Old White was extremely humble. Linley went straight to the point. Old White, roughly a month ago, Hugh brought a young magus of the 7th rank and sold him to you, I believe. Old White glanced at Hugh, then nodded towards Linley. That is correct. That magus of the 7th rank, his name is Reynolds. He is the bosom friend of me, Linley. Linley's voice was very calm, but his eyes stared coldly at Old White. Old White's eyes instantly turned as round as an ox's. Moss, Master Linley's bosom friend. Old White's eyes were filled with shock, terror, and disbelief. Although these slave trading organizations were quite powerful and had some connections to the 4 major assassins' guilds, no matter how powerful they were, they wouldn't dare offend a saint, much less a peak-stage saint such as Linley. Hugh, Old White stared furiously at Hugh. It was Hugh who had sold that Reynolds to their organization. Their organization dared to sell almost anyone, even the disciples of major clans, but why had Hugh sold them, the close friend of a saint? A bitter smile was on Hugh's face. He didn't know either. If he knew, would he have dared to offend Reynolds? Now, Hugh's life was in Linley's hands. Old White. Linley spoke. Old White's reaction speed was extremely fast. He hurriedly said to Linley, Master Linley, don't worry. Since this Mr. Reynolds is your friend, Master Linley, our organization definitely will not do anything to Mr. Reynolds. I will immediately send someone to inform our headquarters. What's the matter? Where is Reynolds? Linley asked. This, a hint of terror was on Old White's face. After all, Reynolds had been sold off as a slave almost a month ago. Linley could sense that something was wrong, and he immediately barked, Speak. Old White had a feeling of terror in his heart. If a saint such as Linley were to grow angry with him, it was totally possible that their entire organization would be wiped off the map. He hurriedly said, Master Linley, when Mr. Reynolds was brought here, we first arranged for his wounds to be treated, and then roughly 10 days later, we sent him off with a large group of slaves in one shipment. From my understanding, Mr. Reynolds should probably already have arrived at our headquarters. Headquarters? Linley frowned. Hugh was puzzled as well. Old White, what's this all about? Doesn't your organization usually sell off slaves directly at the slave markets? Why would you send Mr. Reynolds to your headquarters? Old White hurriedly said, We do sell off ordinary slaves at the slave markets, yes, but Mr. Reynolds was different. He is a magus of the 7th rank. He poses an extremely great risk. If we were to sell Mr. Reynolds to a customer, and then Mr. Reynolds was to use a magic spell and kill the customer, then our organization would have to pay a huge fine. Linley stared at Old White. Therefore, for powerful people such as Mr. Reynolds and other dangerous, top-quality slaves, they all are sent off to the headquarters, where they will be trained for 3 months. They will be trained and taught to never dare to disobey a command and obediently obey their masters. Only then would we deliver them to customers. Old White explained. Linley's face changed. Train them so they wouldn't dare to disobey? Obediently obey their master's orders. The person being trained was an expert like Reynolds. Linley could totally imagine how sinister and terrifying this training was. Where is your headquarters? Take me there. Linley's face changed and he immediately shouted. Old White hesitated for a moment, but seeing the terrifying look in Linley's eyes, he immediately nodded. Yes, Master Linley, I will immediately guide you to our headquarters. Our headquarters is deep within the Rohalt Empire and is far from the borders. Given the winding roads, it is a journey of 3,000 kilometers from here. Old White said. My boss can just fly you over there. The nearby Bibi said unhappily. Bibi was worried for Reynolds as well. After all, when they were at the Ernst Institute, Bibi would often have fun alongside and play around alongside Reynolds. Old White hurriedly nodded. He didn't dare to say a word. Master Linley, there's no need for me to go with you, right? The nearby Hugh was filled with terror. Linley turned to stare at Hugh. Currently, Reynolds was probably being tormented by those people in the slave trading organization's headquarters. Thinking of this, Linley couldn't help but feel a hint of fury. Slash. A blurred claw swiped out. Hugh clutched his throat with terror, but fresh blood still flowed out of his throat. A few moments later, Hugh toppled to the floor. Floating in mid-air, Bibi cast a dissatisfied glance at Hugh. "You bastard, you thought you would be able to save your worthless skin? Are you damn stupid or what? When you were killing the soldiers of Reynolds Corps, you thought it was quite enjoyable, right? Well, today, when I, Bibi, killed you, I felt it was very enjoyable as well." Seeing this scene play out, Old White's body was trembling slightly. "Old fellow, don't be afraid. As long as you obediently follow my boss's orders, I, Bibi, definitely won't mistreat you." Bibi smiled widely, revealing his sharp fangs. Old White had heard of how, during Linley's duel with Hatesun, Linley's two saint-level magical beasts had appeared, one of which seemed to be a mouse-type magical beast and which had easily trampled Hatesun. Staring at the hovering Bibi, Old White was beginning to suspect that this Bibi was most likely that very terrifying magical beast. Terrified, Old White could only force himself to smile at Bibi. Linley snatched Old White, then soared into the air, flying towards the southeast. "Old White, lead the way for me." The terrified Old White cleared his throat a few times, stared at the ground below, then began to direct Linley towards their headquarters. Book 9, His Fame Shakes the World, Chapter 45, Cruelty. Let us return to year 10,009 of the Yulan calendar, September 21st. A few days had passed after Wharton and Nina's grand wedding. At this time, Linley was under the belief that Reynolds had died. However, this is the third day on this ship. That bastard just tortured another slave to death, then tossed him into the river. Through the steel-barred windows, Reynolds could see the outside world. He had watched a seemingly powerful, yet blood-stained body be tossed into the river. A human being, just like that, sank into the river with a plop. In the army, Reynolds had already seen how worthless a human life was. However, on this slave journey, Reynolds had been truly shocked by how terrifying these slavers were. Fortunately, he, Reynolds, was an extremely valuable commodity, and so those slavers didn't dare to kill him. Whap! A whip struck Reynolds heavily on his body, and then against Reynolds' face. Instantly, a bloody welt could be seen forming on his face, and his ragged clothes were covered with rips as well. "Mother of Asterisker, what are you looking at?" a large whip-wielding thug shouted angrily at Reynolds. Reynolds could only huddle into a corner of the ship, not daring to make a sound. He had learned to be obedient. If he wanted to try and be brave and stare back at him, he probably would be tortured this entire night. This slaving vessel was extremely large. The bottommost deck held those cheapest of slaves. Those slavers would sometimes go down to that deck, and if they saw someone they disliked, they would strike them heavily. Reynolds, as an extremely valuable slave, was imprisoned within a special room in the second level. The windows to this room were barred with steel, and there were 2 thugs on watch at all times. Quite a few thugs were stationed in the other rooms on the second floor as well. The third and uppermost floor was used for transporting the leaders of this slaving vessel. One was an expert of the 8th rank, while 2 were experts of the 7th rank. If it wasn't for Reynolds, this slaving vessel wouldn't have had an expert of the 8th rank sent along with it. On the deck of this ship, a tall, strong, bald man walked down from the 3rd floor. "Lord Peel Pyre. The surrounding thugs said respectfully. Seeing the bloodstains on the deck of the ship, the bald man frowned. "Wipe those bloodstains away. Also, slaves are worth **ing money. All of you be careful when you hit them. Don't kill them. If you kill a slave, that means the organization will lose some money. Those thugs didn't dare to make a sound. The bald man snorted, then walked to the chain links at the deck's edge. The cool night wind blew against him as he enjoyed the beautiful night scenery of the Bona Bonai River. Right. What's going on with that Magus? The bald man snorted. A nearby thug immediately said obsequiously, Lord Peel, that little pretty boy Magus started off all high and mighty, but after the boys spent a bit of time training him these past few days, he's learned his lesson. Excellent. The bald man said calmly, all of you, be careful and keep a close eye on that Magus. The only valuable commodity we are escorting this time is that Magus of the 7th rank. And, by the looks of it, this Magus is a noble. When we sell him, the price will be extraordinarily high. Those thugs all nodded. A young Magus of the 7th rank was definitely one of the best auction items that would appear in the slave markets. People would go even crazier for him than they would for a beautiful virgin. What's that noise? The bald man suddenly frowned, then turned his head and stared at the cabin. That sick bastard keeps on coughing. Drag him out. Mother asterisker, he pisses me off. A hint of bloodlust was in the eyes of the bald man. Soon, a skinny young man was dragged out. By the looks of him, he was 18 or 19 years old. His body was covered with a foul odor as well as blood stains. The eyes of this youngster were rather vacant. This long period of imprisonment had caused him to go crazy. He was nothing more than a young man who had left his hometown in search of his dreams, but who would have thought that he would suddenly have been seized and sold to a slaving organization. Just like that, he had entered a nightmare. HRM. The bald man stretched his hand out, and a nearby thug very conscientiously filled it with a whip. Holding the whip, the bald man cracked it in the air, creating a clear, crisp sound. Suddenly, a hint of fear appeared in the blank eyes of the youngster. If you aren't dead, why do you keep coughing? You ruined the wonderful mood I was in. The bald man suddenly landed a vicious whipping blow onto the skinny youth. This whip blow was far stronger than the blows of those common thugs. The skinny youngster's body suddenly trembled violently, and a terrifyingly deep whip scar was left from his face to his waist. Blood immediately began to flow out. As for his clothes, they were destroyed long ago. Whap! 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 The bald man viciously whipped him, fully venting his temper on this poor young man's body. The skinny youngster, quite experienced by now, immediately tried to protect his head and curled into a ball. What he thought was that as long as he could endure, he might still be able to preserve his life. Sadly, although the bald man didn't dare to kill Reynolds, the bald man dared to kill him. Lord Peel, he's dead. A nearby thug whispered. The bald man casually tossed his blood-stained whip to a nearby thug, then turned back to stare at the raging river waters, stretching lazily. Damn, that feels good. You guys, toss that piece of trash overboard. Also, make sure you scrub the deck clean. Yes, Lord Peel. The surrounding thugs quickly began to work as instructed. Plop. With a plopping sound, yet another body was tossed into the river. Each slaving ship carried several hundred slaves within it, and on each trip, over 10 would be tortured to death. The ones which the thugs would beat to death were the ones who were physically the weakest. The physically stronger ones would be able to hold on for longer. Thus, the slaving organization didn't lose too much. Yet another one. Reynolds sighed in his heart. He didn't expect that after managing to escape Neil City alive, he would have fallen to such a state. Reynolds didn't know what his future would be like. Be a slave. Thinking about the debased, dark life of a slave, Reynolds shuddered. Pretty boy, what are you mumbling? Do you want to cast a spell? With an angry roar and a whap sound, another whip blow came, striking him directly on his face. Pain. Humiliation. These thugs clearly knew that Reynolds was a magus of the 7th rank. All of those petty, despicable thugs wanted to whip Reynolds whenever they could, so as to satisfy their petty pride. Motherfer, FCK off. Reynolds was truly angry now. The more he endured, the more overbearing these men became. Oh ho! The thug with the whip raised an eyebrow, his lips curving into a sneer as he looked at Reynolds. You still have the gall to be arrogant. As he spoke, he struck out with another whip. A ferocious light flashed in Reynolds' eyes, and his lips quickly muttered the words to a magic spell. Bam! A series of fireballs the size of a person's head erupted out from Reynolds, striking out wildly towards those two thugs. In the blink of an eye, they had been encircled by over 10 balls of fire. Ah! Those two thugs screamed miserably, their entire bodies covered with flame. What's more, these flames burned much hotter than ordinary, fire-stoked flames. The two thugs quickly had their skin turned into char. Soon, they stopped breathing. Immediately after casting the spell, Reynolds charged outside. But just then, bam! A sudden hole appeared in the ceiling of the room, and a one-eyed man wearing a red robe descended into the middle of the room. With a flash, he reached Reynolds, and then kicked Reynolds with his leg. Bam! Reynolds was knocked into a corner of the cabin, hard. Blood spewed from his mouth. The one-eyed, red-robed man glanced back at the two charred corpses, then stared coldly at Reynolds. You are asking for death. Reynolds stared back at the red-haired and red-robed one-eyed man. No wonder the organization insists on 3 months of special training. All of you are miserable wretches. The one-eyed man cursed. Simply capturing an expert such as a magus of the 7th rank was not enough. To make them feel, in the deepest parts of their hearts, unable to resist any orders, was extremely difficult. If they were angered, they would go all out. Moments later, multiple thugs grabbed Reynolds by his limbs, making sure he couldn't move. The red-haired one-eyed man and 2 bald men stared coldly at Reynolds. Pretty boy, I've reminded you that you need to be a good boy on my boat. But you make me very angry. The red-haired one-eyed man said in a cold voice. Peel, help him improve his memory. Reynolds' face immediately turned pale. He remembered the threat which the one-eyed man had previously made to him. The terror-stricken Reynolds stared with bulging eyes, but the bald man named Peel only laughed as he walked over. Hold one of his hands down for me. Immediately, the thugs grabbed Reynolds' hands and pressed them against the deck. From the deck, Peel retrieved a pair of steel pincers that were used for cutting through iron chains. He pressed the steel pincers around 2 of Reynolds' fingers. Sensing the cold feeling from his fingers, Reynolds' heart trembled. HRMPH squeeze. The one-eyed man sneered coldly. The steel pincers clamped down, and as easily as cutting through cloth, Reynolds' 2 fingers were cut off. Fresh blood flowed out as piercing pain racked Reynolds' body. The pain of losing 2 fingers was far worse than even when he had received a blade chop on his body. Hearing Reynolds' agonized moans, the nearby thugs began to grow excited. The one-eyed man sneered coldly, Pretty boy, remember this. Today, all I did was teach you a little lesson. If you forget this lesson again, I guarantee, you will never forget the next lesson again. After speaking, the one-eyed man turned and walked away. Dark night. Reynolds was curled into the icy cold corner of the room, his body still trembling slightly. His severed finger stubs had already clotted. The 2 nearby thugs occasionally looked at him, their eyes filled with madness. Reynolds had killed 2 of their friends. These thugs naturally were filled with hatred towards him. Mother ***. Pretty boy. A whip suddenly flashed out, aimed at Reynolds' wounded hand. Reynolds tried his best to hide his injured hand behind his back, but part of that whip still clipped his hand. An extreme wave of pain and agony came from his hand, the wound burst open yet again. In particular, the pain of the whip striking his finger bones was especially agonizing. It was as though his fingers had been chopped off yet again. Enough. Stop hitting him, the nearby thug said. Actually, the two thugs were also afraid that Reynolds would go crazy once more and cast magic at them. However, the thug which had just hit Reynolds was on extremely good terms with one of the two thugs that had been killed. Naturally, he wanted revenge. I can't do this. I have to escape. Curled into a ball in the icy corner, Reynolds secretly thought to himself, if this sort of life continues, I really will go insane. Reynolds knew that even if he was able to persevere and hold on to his sanity, the only thing which would welcome him was the life of a slave. Tomorrow, when the ship reaches the shore, I'll make my move. Reynolds had no time for any misgivings. Actually, every day this ship would stop at the shore. One reason was to replenish their food supplies, the other was because the one-eyed man didn't like to eat dry food. He preferred eating fresh delicacies. Thus, they had to go ashore to do so. However, the one-eyed man was very careful. Whenever he went ashore to eat, the other two experts of the 7th rank would watch Reynolds. Time passed very slowly. Lying on the floor late at night, Reynolds felt even colder. What's more, throbbing pain continued to come in waves from his severed fingers. He gritted his teeth and endured. Slowly, the sky began to turn bright. Those two thugs whipped Reynolds a few more times, but Reynolds only huddled in the corner, quietly accepting the blows. He knew that he couldn't resist. The first time he resisted, he had lost 2 fingers. The next time he resisted, then perhaps, like the one-eyed man had threatened, the next lesson would be one he would never forget. Reynolds quietly waited for the boat to near the shore. After a long time. We've reached the shore. Ringing sounds could be heard from the deck above. Soon afterwards, the sound of footsteps could be heard. Clearly, the 2 experts had walked down. Peel, you 2 stand watch. I'll go rest for a bit, and then I'll come and change places with you 2. The one-eyed man's voice could be heard. Milord, don't worry. Peel's voice rang out as well. Hearing the footsteps head away from the ship, Reynolds let out a silent sigh of relief, and then he shut his eyes, once more mentally going through his escape plan. The plan was very dangerous, but he had to give it a try. Glancing at the 2 nearby thugs, Reynolds curled into a corner and lowered his head, and his lips began to slightly move. Book 9, His Fame Shakes the World, Chapter 46. The Order. The red-haired one-eyed thug led a group of thugs off the slave ship, while Peel and the other bald man stood on the deck, casually chatting while occasionally glancing towards Reynolds. Peel, tomorrow, we'll finally reach the provincial capital. At that time, we'll send off those common slaves and have ourselves a good time. Spending every day on a boat is a damnable way to live. The bald man cursed in a whisper. Peel began to laugh as well. But just at this time, Peel suddenly heard a terrifying roar from a magical beast. Hoo! All of a sudden, a terrifying, enormous flame serpent, as thick as a water barrel, came exploding out of the cabin, blasting a hole into the side of the ship. The enormous fire serpent was as thick as a water barrel and over 100 meters long. Howling, it circled around the slave ship, which instantly was set aflame. At the same time, the fire serpent charged directly towards the interior of the ship, blasting a hole through the entire vessel. Aside from around 10 or so slaves in the bottom hold who were burned to the death, the hundreds of other slaves wildly charged out from the hole in the ship which the fire serpent had made. Mother ***. That pretty boy. Peel said, his face changing. Quick. Catch him. The 2 bald men immediately ran towards Reynolds' room. At this time, they didn't care about the common slaves at all, but that enormous fire serpent actually charged straight towards the 2 of them. Mother ***, a blazing fire serpent. Be careful. Peel and the other man were both nervous now. Fire style, spell of the 7th rank, Blazing Fire Serpent. This was the most powerful spell which Reynolds could cast, the Blazing Fire Serpent. If this spell were to advance in level, it would transform into the 8th rank spell, Dance of the Fire Serpents. The Dance of the Fire Serpents would create and attack with 7 enormous fire serpents, and the temperature of the serpents would be even hotter. As for the Blazing Fire Serpent, it was still extremely powerful. Most warriors of the 7th rank wouldn't dare to fight it head-on. The bald man, Peel, dodged as agilely as a fish, avoiding the attack of the Blazing Fire Serpent, while at the same time moving towards where Reynolds previously had been staying. In the room, Peel saw nothing but ash. Those 2 thugs' bodies had been charred to dust, and there were 2 large circular holes in the walls. Clearly, Reynolds had fled via these 2 holes. Ah! Ah! A miserable scream could be heard nearby. The other bald man hadn't been able to completely dodge the Blazing Fire Serpent. As soon as it had brushed by the man, the Blazing Fire Serpent immediately wrapped itself around him. The bald man's battle chi armor quickly was depleted, and the sickly sweet smell of burnt flesh appeared. Seeing this, the look on Peel's face changed. Dale de Luo. Peel went insane. You mother-asterisk-ing bastard. By now, many of the slaves who had escaped from the bottom of the boat had begun frantically fleeing in each direction. After having been captured as slaves, they had felt utterly hopeless, but now, all of them were filled with hope once more, and they frantically fled. Peel charged out from within those 2 holes as well, and with a mighty leap, arrived directly onto the shore. That damnable pretty boy. Peel stared at the slave ship in the Bona River. The utterly demolished ship was slowly sinking. And it continued to burn with sheets of flame. Filled with smoke and fire and water, this ship was clearly finished. Peel, Dale. A furious roar from afar. The red-haired one-eyed man ran over at high speed, his single eye filled with unspeakable rage. Staring at Peel, he howled angrily, Peel, where is he? Where is that Magus? Milord, that Magus cast the Blazing Fire Serpent spell. No idea where he fled to. Dale died. Peel was furious as well. The one-eyed man panted with fury. The Blazing Fire Serpent was capable of dealing with warriors of the 7th rank, but if it had encountered the one-eyed man, given his power as a warrior of the 8th rank, he definitely would have been able to destroy the Blazing Fire Serpent and seize Reynolds. This was the reason why his slaving organization had sent him, a warrior of the 8th rank, on this mission. But the one-eyed man hadn't expected that right after he had taught that Magus a lesson, he would dare to go all out like this. Quick, seize him. Bring that Magus back. The one-eyed man immediately shouted towards the surrounding thugs. The 10 of you, split up and search upstream and downstream. The dozens of you over here, start searching the nearby area. You must bring that Magus back to me. Quickly. Yes, milord. The furious thugs scattered every which way. Most of their forces were concentrated in the surrounding area, while only 5 thugs were sent searching upstream and downstream. Reynolds was dressed like the other slaves, in absolutely ragged clothes, and his body was covered with scars. Because the other slaves had fled as well, on many occasions, those thugs would see some other slaves, think they were Reynolds, and immediately rush over to seize them. Unfortunately, they were wasting their time. An hour later, the one-eyed man stood at the harbor, his heart filled with rage as he stared angrily around him. Milord, we've discovered over 10 slaves downstream, but we didn't find that Magus. A thug ran over to report. The speed at which they had traveled on land was definitely faster than the speed of the flowing river. Milord, we didn't find that Magus upstream either. Milord, we didn't find that Magus in the surrounding areas. All we found were those common slaves. Hearing one report after another from his subordinates, the one-eyed man stared at the surrounding area. He was so angry he could die. This harbor was the harbor for a small township. Their organization didn't have any forces here. This was why the one-eyed man had no choice but to send those few dozen thugs to search for Reynolds. Several dozen people had spent an hour without finding Reynolds. Then, there was no way he could be found. Because 1 hour was more than enough time for a person to travel a great distance. And how could several dozen people search an area of several dozen square kilometers? Bastard! The one-eyed man snarled and cursed. Let's go. We have to report this immediately to the organization. That pretty boy better hope that I don't catch him. Otherwise, I will make sure his fate is worse than death. The sky was dark now. The one-eyed man and the others had already left helplessly. Several thousand meters away, next to the riverbank, a human form emerged from the water. Patooey! Reynolds spat out the breathing reed from his mouth. Glancing at his surroundings, Reynolds finally let out a long sigh. Reynolds hadn't dared to be the slightest bit incautious during this escape attempt. After casting his spell, he had immediately dove into the water, then plucked a hollow reed and used it to breathe. Each time he dove down, he would travel more than 1,000 meters before daring to raise his head. I'm very far away now. Those people can't possibly find me now. Reynolds went onto the shore. Reynolds' body suddenly began to emit a white steam. A few moments later, Reynolds' tattered clothes were totally dry again. Glancing at the surrounding area, Reynolds centered himself through using the flow of the river. That slaving organization has people in all the major cities. It is better if I stick to the smaller cities. I can't go back through the border between the two empires. The slaving organizations have quite a few people in the border cities. Although Reynolds believed that they wouldn't spend too much effort searching for him, it was better for him to be careful. Reynolds had decided to first enter the anarchic lands through the Rohald Empire, and then return to the O'Brien Empire through the anarchic lands. The world was very dark now. The only light that could be seen was sporadic campfires. A dark shadow was flying through the skies, slashing through the air at high speed. Whoosh! Their high-speed flight caused Old White to unconsciously narrow his eyes. From the skies, he could clearly make out the various roads, and so it was easy for him to make out the various landmarks. Master Linley, it is right below us. Old White pointed at a distant countryside town. Oh? That little town is your organization's headquarters. Linley glanced at Old White. The town seemed no different from any other ordinary little town. In the darkness, a few lamplights could be seen. Old White hurriedly nodded. It is. This is just some of our organization's camouflaging abilities. Whoosh! Linley immediately charged down, leaving a black shadowy trail of after-images behind him. He landed in the middle of the headquarters of the slaving organization, this countryside town. Linley was wearing a deep blue robe. Hovering up into the air, he loosened his hand, allowing Old White to fall to the ground. Have the leader of your organization come out. Old White didn't dare to disobey. At this moment, a number of people ran over at high speed, surrounding them. But when they saw Linley was standing in mid-air, they were all stunned. Generally speaking, only saints were capable of flight. Naturally, powerful wind-style magi could fly as well. In truth, right now, Linley was only capable of flight without transforming because he had already cast the wind shadow spell. Old White, why have you come? A middle-aged madam glanced at Linley, then whispered to Old White. Old White shouted loudly, Quick, quick, have the leader come. This is Master Linley, the mighty dragon blood warrior, Master Linley. Master Linley. These words were quite effective. A slaving organization, in terms of power, was far inferior to even the 3 major trading unions or the 4 great assassins' guilds. Naturally, it didn't dare to offend a saint. Many people immediately ran to get their leaders, and all of the high-ranking people quickly began to assemble. Linley stood there in mid-air, calmly waiting. BB stood atop of Linley's shoulders. Boss, This little town looked quite ordinary, but the insides of these buildings are quite unique. Many of them have underground basements. Bibi spoke to Linley mentally. Linley nodded slightly. In just a short while, a large group of people began to head in this direction from afar, with their leader being a tall, thin man who was dressed in a gaudy long robe. This man was half running, half walking, his forehead covered with sweat. Master Linley, my name is Dennis Dan Nisi, and I am the leader of this organization. Is there something we can do for you, Master Linley? If there is, please inform us, Master. The tall, thin man said humbly, filled with terror. Although he had never met Linley before, a saint who could hover in mid-air, no matter who he really was, wasn't someone he dared to offend. Linley glanced at him, then said, Dennis. A month ago, you bought a magus from Old White over at the border city. He should have arrived here by now. Dennis was startled. A somewhat fatter, older man next to Dennis hurriedly said, Master Linley, I was responsible for this assignment. Halfway here, at the Bona River, that magus burned our slaving vessel and fled. Fled. Linley was surprised but also relieved. Fourth Bro was quite impressive, to be able to escape from the clutches of the slaving organization. Only now did Dennis come to his senses, and he nodded. I'm aware of this event as well. After the magus fled, we sent our forces to some cities to try and recapture him, but we've yet to find him. This was over 10 days ago now. Leader, that magus is Master Linley's bosom friend. Old White hurriedly said. Dennis' face immediately turned ugly to behold, while at the same time he was filled with fear. Linley glanced at them. From today onwards, you are forbidden from attempting to capture my friend. Dennis hurriedly said, of course. If we find him, we will definitely treat him as an honored guest. Linley nodded calmly. Without wasting any more words, Linley and Bibi flew off and left. Given the current situation, the slaving organization didn't really matter much now. Fourth Bro had escaped over 10 days ago. By now, he should have fled quite far. In mid-air. Bibi, you go back first. Immediately have Zisler and the others head out towards the anarchic lands. I plan to spend a bit of time scanning the area around the Bona River and between the borders of the Rohald Empire and the O'Brien Empire. I want to see if I can find Fourth Bro. After I finish my search, I will join up with you. Linley had already come to this decision. Searching using spiritual energy was actually quite a painful experience for most saint-level warriors. Most saint-level warriors would only be able to occasionally search using their spiritual energy, because in truth, their spiritual energy wasn't extremely strong. It was magi who had powerful spiritual energy. In terms of spiritual energy, that Hateson who had been training for centuries was at most on par with Linley. It would only take a short hour to cover that distance, but if one were to search carefully, one would definitely have to spend at least several days. Got it? Bibi obediently nodded his little head, then flew at high speed towards the O'Brien Empire. Book 9, His Fame Shakes the World, Chapter 47, Establishing a Base in the Anarchic Lands. Transforming into his dragon blood warrior form, Linley began to trace from the Bona River all the way to the border city of Neil, carefully scanning the surrounding areas. Every so often, he would have to rest to recover his spiritual energy. He spent 6 full days and nights searching, and viewed all the nearby cities as well. However, he didn't find Reynolds. Master Linley, don't worry. As soon as our Dawson conglomerate discovers young Master Reynolds, we will definitely make sure he safely makes it back home. A supervisor for the Dawson conglomerate within one of the prefectural cities at the border of the Rohald Empire said respectfully to Linley. Linley nodded slightly. Right now, the only choice he had was to entrust this task to the Dawson conglomerate. In his heart, Linley felt a bit puzzled. Where did Fourth Bro run off to? Why didn't he go to the Dawson conglomerate's branch headquarters? The Dawson conglomerate has branches in each of the various prefectural cities. Actually, Linley didn't understand. Reynolds had been truly terrified by his time spent aboard that slaving vessel. Reynolds had decided that so long as he was within the borders of the Rohalt Empire, no matter what, he would not enter any large cities. Although large cities had branch headquarters of the Dawson conglomerate, it also had slaving organizations. If he were to be caught by slaving organizations, once he was discovered by them, he would be in dire straits. Any risk of being caught is too much risk. I'd rather take some side routes. Reynolds was very firm in his decision. Given his power, heading towards the anarchic lands via some cross-country traveling wasn't too hard. Once he reached the anarchic lands, he would then make contact with the Dawson conglomerate. By then, he would be able to return safely. By nightfall, in an ordinary courtyard within a prefectural city of the O'Brien Empire's southeast administrative province, Zisler, the Barker brothers, Rebecca, Lena, and Jen were all here. The sound of knocking could be heard. Carrying that massive grey tax on his back, Gates strode forward and threw the door open. In front of the door were 3 attendants, all pushing food carts. "What took you so long?" Gates swept the 3 men with his ox-like stare, causing their hearts to tremble. In front of the massive gates, the 3 of them were like small children. Suddenly, a bestial roar could be heard from the courtyard. The 3 attendants turned towards the sound. The black-cloud panther, Haru, lazily padded his way over. The natural, baleful aura of a top-class magical beast such as the black-cloud panther was more than enough to set hearts trembling. Haru glanced at the 3 with his dark, cold eyes, and then disdainfully turned his head and lay down on the ground. The 3 attendants exchanged glances, not daring to make any sound. They immediately put all the plates of food onto the table, then quickly left. When they walked out of the courtyard, they wiped the cold sweat from their foreheads. Who the hell are these guys? Those 5 men were enormous. And those axes were so huge. They have to weigh at least 1,000 pounds each. And that old man. He looked like a skeleton. All he did was glance at me, and I felt fear. But those 3 ladies were certainly pretty. If I could marry such a beautiful girl, I'd be willing to have my lifespan shortened by a few dozen years. In the eyes of these hotel attendants, the guests in this courtyard were definitely extremely, terrifyingly powerful entities. While Zisler and the others ate, Bibi and Haru remained within the courtyard. This was because they could sense that Linley was heading back at high speed. A short while later, Linley, dressed in a deep blue robe, landed from the skies. Lord Linley. Barker and his brothers ran over to welcome him excitedly. Jen, Rebecca, and Lena all came over to welcome him as well. "Linley, how did it go? Did you find Reynolds?" Zisler asked. Linley shook his head. Right now, Linley was in a fairly good mood. Since the slave trading organization hadn't found Reynolds, given Reynolds power as a magus of the 7th rank, as long as he didn't anger someone powerful, he shouldn't be in any danger. 4th Bro has been a soldier for many years now, and the slave trading organization is no longer after him either. Given the circumstances, he should have a 100% chance of escaping and returning. Linley was very confident in his friend. If Reynolds isn't able to make it back safely under such favorable conditions, he wouldn't be worthy of being your bro, Lord. The Rohalt Empire is usually very stable and very safe. Gates said loudly. In the past, when we brothers were just warriors of the 7th rank, we lived a wonderful life in the 18 northern duchies. Linley laughed. He entered the room with the others and began to eat dinner. Linley. Zisler put down his utensils, then asked, "We are about to head off to the anarchic lands. What are your plans?" Linley knew that Zisler was the most experienced member of his team. With an 800-year-old man by his side, many things would be much easier to accomplish. Zisler, what do you feel we should do? Linley asked. Barker said, Lord Linley, actually, I imagine that the anarchic lands must be very similar to our 18 northern duchies. You do all your talking with your fists. Given our tremendous power, we definitely would be able to quickly establish a mighty force. Zisler nodded. What Barker just described is one type of method, yes. Linley, I believe we have two options right now. The first is what Barker just said. Using our reputation as saints, we can quickly dominate a very wide swathe of territory. In the anarchic lands, the rally call of a saint is very effective. Linley nodded slightly. The anarchic lands were often in a state of chaos and warfare. The citizens caught in these chaotic battles desperately hoped for their leader to be a powerful figure. If he publicly announced himself as a saint, there would definitely be many people willing to follow Linley. After all, saints would be able to provide their followers with a good deal of safety and security. The second method is to, at least at first, not announce your status, Linley. We'll start in the smaller regions. First, we'll find an ordinary little city where the lives of the commoners are unbearably bad. Even if I were to act by myself, I could easily take over such a small city. And then, we will slowly expand to larger cities, then erect our own duchy. And then, we continue, one step at a time. In the past, I was a Grand Duke in the anarchic lands, myself. Zisler laughed. The second method was the method which many ambitious people used. After all, the first method could only be used by powerful experts with overwhelming force. Milord, what method do you wish to use? Zisler looked at Linley. The benefit to the first method is that it is fast. Within a year, we can easily take over countless duchies in the anarchic lands. The second method is slower. But it allows us to have a more stable foundation. Jen, the other two girls, Barker and his brothers all stared at Linley, waiting for his decision. Zisler, we'll carry out the second method. Linley made his decision after pondering for a while. Our target is the Radiant Church, and the Radiant Church is very skilled at seducing the masses. We need to move slowly, one step at a time, and let the commoners be fully willing to follow our orders. We need to give them a strong sense of belonging. Otherwise, even if we take over a large amount of territory, when we fight against the Radiant Church, we will have many traitors and riots. Linley said. Zisler laughed and nodded. Very well then. We'll secretly expand. We won't attract any attention. Otherwise, if we start raising Linley's banner from the start, we will attract a great deal of hostility from many areas. Zisler was quiet for a moment, then continued. Linley, the Radiant Church and the Cult of Shadows both have tremendous influence in the anarchic lands. If you wish to expand there, I think, the first step would be to begin closer to the Forest of Darkness. In other words, the northernmost area of the anarchic lands. Linley raised an eyebrow. The northern part of the anarchic lands. Right. The area near the Forest of Darkness. Because it often suffers attacks from the magical beasts of the Forest of Darkness, the people of that area are extremely sturdy and very violent. Few of the citizens of that area have much faith in the Radiant Church. They worship the strong. In addition, given our power, we don't need to fear those low-rank and medium-rank magical beasts at all. Zisler smiled. Hearing Zisler's words, Linley agreed in his mind. From the east edge to the west edge of the northern part of the anarchic lands is roughly 1,000 miles. There are many small cities with only a few tens of thousands of citizens in them. There will be plenty of options for us. Zisler said confidently. As Zisler saw it, occupying and taking over a city in the anarchic lands which had a population of just a few tens of thousands was as easy as breathing. Either Zisler or the Barker brothers could easily erect a dukedom in the anarchic lands, all by themselves, much less occupy a small city. Linley's team was truly powerful. He had a whole group of saints, and Linley, Bibi, and Harry were peak stage saints. Most likely, even the powerful hidden force the Radiant Church had within the anarchic lands couldn't match Linley for power. For such a team, building a base in the anarchic lands was incomparably easy. The anarchic lands was more than half the size of the O'Brien Empire, and was definitely on par with the size of the current Radiant Church, Rohalt Empire, and Rhine Empire. Long ago, when a calculation had been run on the anarchic lands, it was found that the 48 duchies had a total population of over 300 million. Such an enormous population wasn't much lower than the population of the Rhine Empire and the Rohalt Empire. The countless years of chaotic battles hadn't lowered the population all that much. Instead, all it had done was make the people of that area even more vicious and violent. This sort of chaotic region was a veritable playground for powerful experts. After passing the border, Linley and his team entered the anarchic lands. Upon entering their very first city in the anarchic lands, Linley could sense what a state of frenzy and chaos the people here were in. Long years of warfare have caused food to become extremely expensive in the anarchic lands. Although some duchies have worked hard to try to bring an end to warfare during the harvest seasons, sometimes, they are still forced to do battle, Zisler sighed. The anarchic lands were totally different from the Holy Union and the O'Brien Empire. In the cities of the Holy Union and the O'Brien Empire, one could sense a peaceful, amiable aura. Noble madams and young noble ladies there all wore lavish clothes and casually strolled about the streets. But in the anarchic lands, heavily armored warriors could be seen everywhere, and the cities were filled with a ferocious aura, giving the sense that a single wrong word could result in murder. This was the norm, here. Linley's team continued to travel towards the north. As they traveled, they carefully observed the local areas, gaining a better understanding of the anarchic lands. A priest. Linley saw from afar someone dressed as a priest. Damn the Radiant Church. Chapels can be seen everywhere in the anarchic lands, and all of them openly preach and proselytize for the Radiant Church. As they continued to travel, Linley's heart grew heavy. The Radiant Church's influence here was indeed tremendous. Linley's team moved quite quickly. After journeying for roughly 10 days, they arrived at the northern part of the anarchic lands. Linley and his people entered a small city known as Black Dirt City. It was noon. Within a private room in an ordinary hotel, Zisler said to Linley, "Based on my investigations from earlier this morning, the city governor of this place, Black Dirt City, is a classic example of all bronze, no brains. All he wants to do is be the ruler of a small city and enjoy the life of a local tyrant. He is extremely tyrannical and oppressive to the common folk. I think that this should be quite suitable for us to take over as our first little city. But this is only the first city we've considered." Linley was rather surprised. Zisler laughed. "This is normal. In the anarchic lands, aside from a very few duchies, most rulers are extremely oppressive towards their citizens. After all, war could break out at any time and they might lose their power. Naturally, they'll want to enjoy it while they can." Linley nodded slightly. "Fine. Then let's start with this Black Dirt City." Linley immediately decided. The eyes of the nearby Barker brothers lit up. Gates was the first to say excitedly, "Lord, don't worry. You don't need to do a thing. We'll just head on over and kill that leader, and then terrify those few thousand soldiers into submission. There'll be nothing difficult at all about it." The 5 Barker brothers had led armies to war in the 18 northern duchies. They very much loved that sort of blood-pumping life. "Lord, don't worry. Tonight, you'll be living inside the governor's mansion of Black Dirt City." Barker slapped his chest as he spoke. Book 9, His Fame Shakes the World, Chapter 48, Administration. Noontime. The blazing sun hung high in the western skies, baking Black Dirt City with its scorching rays. The garrison soldiers of Black Dirt City were lazily and casually strolling about within Black Dirt City, while a few poor guards were being baked by the sun while standing guard on the walls. This damn weather! It is unbearably hot during the day, and deathly cold at night. A large man dressed in tattered armor cursed softly. Him and the 9 companions by his side were one of the squads belonging to the city guard. Whenever the common citizens of the city saw these soldiers, they immediately fled away, their faces full of fear. Seeing this, another warrior cursed softly. Now that I'm working under that greedy, fat pig, some of my elders are beginning to look down at me. That fat pig is too greedy. That mother of asterisker. If it weren't for the fact that I have a wife and son to feed, I wouldn't do this job. Another warrior agreed. In Black Dirt City, that fat city governor had an extremely poor reputation. These warriors who had joined the army for the sake of feeding their families all secretly cursed this vile city governor behind his back, but they didn't dare to fight against him. This was because the city governor had an extremely powerful and despotic son, who was a peak stage warrior of the 7th rank. That sort of power was more than enough for one to become a local tyrant in small cities such as this. Faster, faster. From nearby, the hoof steps of a knight's horse could be heard coming towards them at high speed. Seeing the soldiers from afar, the knight immediately cried out loudly, "Brothers, quick, come and pay your respects to the new city governor. That greedy, fat pig is dead. Quick, go pay your respects to the new city governor." The 10 men in the squad were startled. They glanced at each other, then immediately began to laugh with excitement. "Ha ha, quick, let's go to the governor's mansion." In the anarchic lands, the common citizens had virtually no sense of belonging. This month, they would be ruled by one city governor, next month, it might be a different one. The commoners didn't ask for much, they only wanted to have enough to feed themselves and their families. The governor's mansion of Black Dirt City could be considered a city within a city. Black Dirt City's army was divided into 2 major battalions, with each battalion having 1,800 people. One of the battalions was the city guard, while the other was the city governor's personal guard. One could imagine how afraid of death the city governor was, to use half of his military force to protect his own mansion. There were a large number of soldiers currently centered within the city governor's mansion. All 3,600 soldiers quickly assembled there. The city governor's mansion could easily fit in 1,800 people. Atop a broad training field, Barker and his brothers stood in the center. Their rippling muscles and massive, powerful bodies made them look like gods of battle. Those terrifying black gria taxes they carried on their back were especially frightening. The soldiers all stood there, keeping quiet out of fear. "Brothers!" A powerful man with short golden hair roared loudly, "That vile, fat pig and his son have already been chopped into meat paste by these 5 lords. These 5 lords are almighty combatants of the 9th rank. Invincible combatants of the 9th rank." As soon as they heard the words, "combatants of the 9th rank," all of the soldiers were stunned. Combatants of the 9th rank? Combatants of the 9th rank would come to a little city like ours. Whispers could be heard circulating throughout the crowd. Bam! Gates took a few steps forward, his demonically powerful aura causing the nearby soldiers to all take a step back. Gates laughed thunderously, "All of you, listen up. From today onwards, Black Dirt City belongs to we 5 brothers. My big brother, Barker, is the city governor." Gates drew out the gray tax from his back. Staring at the surrounding people, he said, "If any of you have any objections to my big brother, Barker, being the city governor, you are welcome to come compete with me." Who would dare compete against such a terrifying god of battle? The city governor's son, who had terrified Black Dirt City for so long, had been chopped to death by a single blow from Gates' great axe. Then again, most of the soldiers present hadn't personally witnessed this themselves. The natural, violent atmosphere of the region caused some of the soldiers to stare at Gates questioningly. Just being physically big didn't necessarily mean someone was very powerful. This grey tax of mine was made from countless precious materials. It weighs 5,300 pounds. Gates casually tossed his grey tax forward, and it soared agilely through the air, landing against a nearby boulder which the soldiers used for weight training. The 10,000-pound boulder didn't even move when struck. Many of the watching soldiers were stunned. Could it be that this grey tax is made from wood, and it just has a layer of metallic dye on top of it? Boom! The boulder suddenly exploded and disintegrated into a storm of dust. Wielding something heavy as though it were light. All the onlookers stared with their mouths gaping open. These soldiers had heard of people being able to smash a 10,000-pound boulder, but to cause it to instantly disintegrate into a pile of dust, this wasn't something which could be accomplished just through brute strength. All the soldiers turned to look at Gates with adoration and worship in their eyes. Gates delightedly let out a thunderous laugh. He had used this technique in the past in the 18 northern duchies as well. The anarchic lands and the 18 northern duchies were very similar. Powerful experts were deeply venerated. Looks like there are no objections. Gates said loudly. Wonderful. From today forward, you are now the soldiers of my big brother. There's a benefit to working for my big brother. In the future, your military pay will be triple that of your current military pay. Triple military pay? The 3,000-plus soldiers stared in shock, but then, they all let a thunderous, sky-shaking cry. Long live Lord Barker! What more could they ask for? These 5 experts possessed unbelievable power, and they gave a very high military pay. Naturally, they loved leaders like this. The city of Blackdirt now had a new city governor. It was the mighty Barker and his 4 brothers, all of whom were powerful warriors of the 9th rank. Their weapons alone weighed 5,300 pounds. Having such a powerful leader was something which all of the citizens of Blackdirt City celebrated over. The most exciting thing was, the Lord City Governor had declared that as long they were obedient and faithful, the citizens of Blackdirt City would be forever exempted from paying taxes. Forever exempted from paying taxes. In the anarchic lands, this could be described as a miracle. After all, if there were no taxes, where would one have money to pay their soldiers? But this problem, to Linley, was no problem at all. He held the terrifying amount of wealth which the royal clan of the Kingdom of Fenley had accumulated for thousands of years. He could casually pull out 100 million gold coins. And that would already be more than enough. Powerful leaders and high salaries, combined with no taxes, given the above, the people here quickly gained the hope and desire to forever live under this administration. And because of the high military pay, many people now desired to join the army. At the same time, when some of the commoners nearby Blackdirt City learned about this, they hurriedly immigrated to Blackdirt City. Half a year after the change in leadership in Blackdirt City, within the city governor's mansion, the newly selected housekeeper, Neimi, was currently giving a detailed report to this mysterious Lord Lay. As the administrator for various matters in Blackdirt City, Neimi knew that although the city governor was nominally Barker, in truth, the highest authority here was that mysterious Lord Lay. Milord, the population of Blackdirt town numbers nearly 80,000. If we add that number to the large number of surrounding villages, then in total, the population under Blackdirt City's control is a total of around 700,000. Currently, our military is expanding as well. We now have a total of 5 battalions, all at full strength. The 5 battalions number a total of 9,000 soldiers. Neimi said respectfully. Linley, seated above him, nodded slightly upon hearing this. Enough, Neimi. You can retire now. Barker glanced at him. Yes, Lord City Governor. Neimi immediately left respectfully. Right now, the people seated in the room were Linley and the other core members of the team. According to the decision which Zisler and Linley had originally made, to outsiders, they said that Lord Barker was the city governor. Barker was a very ordinary name. Nobody else knew which Barker this was. Lord, you really gave us a good scare when you casually brought out a Magi crystal card with 100 million gold in it. Barker chortled. Linley laughed. Don't worry about the financial side of things. In the past, Linley had essentially stripped away thousands of years of accumulated wealth from the kingdom of Fenley. Zisler said, Linley, the reason we are being so generous to the citizens of Black Dirt City is because we want Black Dirt City to become our strongest, most resilient base, and to make sure that the people here are absolutely loyal to us. It is enough that we exempt the city from paying taxes. In the future, at most, we can just lower the tax rate in our cities. In addition, in order to function well, a nation needs to be able to be self-sufficient. It can't always rely on outside money. It has to be self-sustaining. Linley nodded. I don't know much about managing a country. I'll let Zisler and Jen handle these matters. Linley laughed as he glanced at Jen. Zisler had controlled a duchy before in the anarchic lands, while Jen had helped her little brother administrate the affairs of the prefectural city of Serre for multiple years. Both of them knew much more about city management than Linley did. Jen nodded and laughed. Big brother Linley, the most important part of being a leader is knowing who to use. Just let me handle it. Zisler concurred. Jen is right. Linley, you are our standard bearer. In the anarchic lands, an ultimate expert has a great deal of influence. Look at the war god. The war god always stays on War God Mountain and never gets personally involved in anything, but everyone understands that so long as the war god is alive, then the O'Brien Empire will never collapse. Lord, in the future, your relationship to our nation will be the same as the war god's relationship to the O'Brien Empire. Barker agreed. Linley nodded slightly. I understand your reasoning. Oh, right. Yesterday, I took a stroll around Black Dirt City. I saw that a few dozen kilometers northeast of Black Dirt City, there is a small mountain known as Mt. Black Raven. I plan to train there. Linley could sense the vastness of both the laws of the earth and the laws of the wind. Linley wished to spend a large amount of time subsuming himself in them, and spend some time attuning to them and understanding them. In the central southern part of the anarchic lands, there was a prefectural city with hundreds of thousands of citizens. Within a room on the 5th floor of a 5-story tall hotel, an old man with white streaked hair opened a letter, carefully reading its contents. What I feared the most has come to pass. The old man began to frown. The Emperor ordered us not to act against Linley and just observe him. A while ago, we learned that Linley's group had entered the anarchic lands. At that time, we thought he was just engaging in tourism. Who would have thought that they'd take over a city? What exactly are they planning? The old man had a bad feeling. Linley was a major foe of the Radiant Church. A foe which they didn't want to have to fight. But now, I hope Linley is just messing around and having fun in the anarchic lands. The old man was frowning. What he feared the most was, that Linley had come to the anarchic lands expressly to deal with the Radiant Church. We don't want to stir up trouble with him, but if he insists on stirring up trouble with us, we'll have to act. The old man was a high-level manager for the Radiant Church in the anarchic lands. He knew exactly how powerful Linley's side was. As for now, let's just watch. Let's see what Linley plans to do. Outside of Black Dirt City, in a small mountain roughly 1,000 meters tall which was located in the direction of the Forest of Darkness, Linley was seated in the meditative position on the top of a large tree. The tree top swayed along with the blowing wind, and Linley swayed along with it, as gently and as agilely as a leaf. He was carrying a 3,600 pounds adamantine heavy sword, and yet he was seated on the crown of a tree. Linley had indeed reached a very high level in his ability to control the wind. Slow. Fast. It isn't that simple. Linley was constantly pondering his tempos of the wind technique. The tempos of the wind was actually utilizing two contradictory aspects of the wind in perfect harmony, with the clash between these two aspects creating a terrifyingly sharp blade of air. But Linley was discovering that as he continued to study the individual aspects of slow and fast, these aspects had additional astonishing secrets that had yet to be revealed to him. The limits to the profound truths of slowness, the limits to the analytics of hyperspeed, Linley was totally absorbed in his meditations on the elemental laws. This sort of meditation relied entirely on a single sudden spark of insight. Perhaps Linley would suddenly gain an insight onto the laws of the earth, at which point Linley would begin to analyze the laws of the earth. If he suddenly gained insight into the laws of the wind, he would go study that instead. Those days he spent in training on Mt. Black Raven passed very quickly. Book 9, His Fame Shakes the World, Chapter 49, The Mysterious Mountain Village. The sun was high in the sky. Reynolds was currently hiking through a particularly large mountain. I should have entered the anarchic lands by now. Reynolds himself wasn't too clear how far he had walked, after having hurried for 10 days. Reynolds generally headed in whatever direction looked the most desolate. Even if he saw cities from afar, he wouldn't enter them. The mountain that Reynolds was now hiking on was extremely large and took up an enormous amount of land. After hiking for a long time, Reynolds arrived at one of the mountain peaks and gazed around him. Suddenly, he discovered that this giant mountain actually had a tiny little mountain village in the center. Reynolds licked his dry, chapped lips. Grabbing a fistful of long rattan vines, he began to climb down into the little mountain village in the center of the mountain. This little mountain village had people inside it. When they saw Reynolds walk in, they glanced at him with curious stares. Clearly, they rarely saw visitors. There were quite a few people in this little mountain village. Guessing based on what his eyes had seen, Reynolds estimated that there were several thousand people here. There was even an open air inn that was rather simply made. Reynolds walked over and immediately sat down and said, 2 cups of water, and then some dishes and a bottle of wine. But as soon as he sat down, Reynolds noticed something. This place, Reynolds' heart shook. He suddenly had discovered that every single person here emanated the aura of an expert. From what Reynolds could tell, there were many warriors of the 6th and 7th ranks, and even warriors of the 8th rank, as well as some mighty magi. Not warriors. Magi. And extremely powerful ones. Friend, how did you end up here? A bald man came over with a bottle of wine and 2 bowls. Come, let's drink. Reynolds now sensed that this mountain village was no ordinary place. He immediately replied, I came from across the border with the Rohald Empire. I was planning to enter the anarchic lands. I didn't take any of the main roads, and hiked my way through the mountains to the north. Whenever I encountered a river, I swam my way through. Whenever I encountered a mountain, I hiked through. I didn't expect that while hiking through this mountain, I would have run into this little mountain village. The bald man nodded and laughed. So that's the case. No wonder. There's no roads near our village, and this mountain is extremely desolate. Generally speaking, we'll usually go 8 or 10 years without seeing a single outsider. Another man walked over, laughing. Reynolds was growing anxious. The 2 people in front of him were both exceedingly powerful, perhaps at the 7th or the 8th rank. What in the world is this place? Why are there so many experts here? Reynolds secretly wondered. Drinking and chatting with these 2 people, Reynolds discovered that the people of this mysterious mountain village weren't totally cut off from the outside world. In fact, they knew a great deal about the outside world. Princess Monica Men'enika is coming. The bald man suddenly said. Many people turned to look in one direction, and Reynolds did as well. He saw a beautiful young woman with long jade hair walk over with a serving maid behind her, while greeting the other villagers along the way warmly. Seeing this beautiful woman, Reynolds instantly was stunned. That beautiful face, that friendly smile. Despite often having dalliances amidst the flowers, Reynolds felt utterly bewitched and smitten. I think, I have found the place I was meant to be. The playboy Reynolds had dallied with quite a few young noble ladies. But there hadn't been a single person who had successfully moved his heart, which was why he was still single up till now. But this girl in this mysterious mountain village had a very unique aura, one which made Reynolds' heart shake. The girl named Monica glanced at Reynolds. Reynolds instantly discovered that Monica's clear eyes contained a hint of jade light. She looked like one of the legendary spirits, utterly bewitching. Monica laughed and spoke to him. "Hello there, outsider." Reynolds immediately rose to his feet and said with great courtesy, "Beautiful Princess Monica, my name is Reynolds." Monica suddenly glanced at Reynolds' left hand. She opened her mouth in surprise, then looked at Reynolds. "What happened to your hand?" "It was injured by someone," Reynolds said casually. Monica immediately walked towards him. "Stretch your hand out." Reynolds didn't ask any questions, immediately stretching his left hand out. The wound which had been left by those steel pincers was heart-shakingly frightful to behold. Monica's lips began to move slightly, and a short while later, countless specks of light entered Reynolds' left hand like a mirage-like nebula. Reynolds could clearly sense that the wound on his left hand was rapidly healing, and 2 new fingers were growing out from it. In the blink of an eye, Reynolds' left hand returned to a perfect state, as though it had never been injured. This, Reynolds was shocked, and he stared at the young lady named Monica in surprise. He hadn't expected that this young lady named Monica was a light-style magus, and an extremely powerful one. Her power wasn't one whit inferior to Reynolds'. When Reynolds saw the look of concentration on Monica's face, his heart immediately began to thump wildly. Nightfall. The sun was setting in the west, and the skies had a large amount of red, flame-like clouds. On the grass by the mountain village, Reynolds and Monica were walking side by side. Reynolds looked at Monica's beautiful face, and in his heart, he felt a hint of contentment. He had already stayed here in this mysterious mountain village for more than a month now. No one in the mountain village had suggested that he leave. During his month in the mountain village, Reynolds had learned that the vast majority of the villagers here had never left the mountain village. Only a very small percentage would occasionally make trips to the outside world. When they returned, they would inform the other villagers of the events of the outside world. Monica was only 20 years old, but she was already a light-style magus of the 7th rank. In terms of talent, she was actually superior to Reynolds. She was even more talented than Reynolds. "I can't continue like this. I have to inform my parents and third bro that I am alive." Reynolds wanted to meet his friends and family, but Monica's allure for him was simply too strong. And to Monica, this outsider, Reynolds, knew many things. Whenever she chatted with him, Monica found that she could learn many things about the outside world. Reynolds was particularly good at making conversation. This made Monica very happy whenever she was with him. "If I were to always be with Monica, how wonderful would that be?" Reynolds' heart was filled with hope. "Miss Monica." A voice suddenly came from behind them, and a silver-haired middle-aged man walked towards them. Reynolds was startled. He hadn't noticed this man approach them. Clearly, the man was extremely powerful. "Uncle Miller me le. When Monica turned her head and saw this middle-aged man with short silver hair, she immediately called out in laughter. Miller had a simple, honest face. Glancing at Reynolds, he then laughed towards Monica in a friendly manner. "Miss Monica, it is getting late. Your mother is waiting for you to go home and eat dinner." Monica nodded, then smiled towards Reynolds. "Big brother Reynolds, I'm going home for now. See you later." Reynolds smiled and nodded as well. After Monica left, Miller stared at Reynolds. "Outsider kid, you've been in our mountain village for some time now. You now need to make a choice." "Choice?" Reynolds felt surprised. Miller nodded calmly. "Since you've been able to find us, that means that destiny has led you here. You now have two choices. The first is to forever stay in our mountain village, and become one of our villagers, never to leave. The second is to immediately leave, and never enter again. You only have two choices. If you disobey, you will definitely die. These cold, calm words made Reynolds' heart quiver. Leave forever? Or never leave the mountain village again? Reynolds didn't want to make either choice. Mr. Miller, Reynolds hurriedly said, based on what I know, aren't there some people in the village who occasionally go outside? Miller glanced at him, then chuckled. True. Our mountain village has a yearly contest. Anyone who makes it into the top 10 during this tournament is permitted to leave the village and make a trip to the outside world. But given your current power, you aren't even able to rank in our top 100, much less top 10. Reynolds was very anxious. Although I currently can't make the ranking, in the future I might. Reynolds had already made his decision. Mr. Miller, I have decided to become a member of this village. Although Reynolds loved his parents, when he was in the army, he often went a year or two without seeing his parents a single time. So long as his parents knew that he was alive, that was all that mattered. In the future, he would have a chance to meet them. There shouldn't be too much of a problem. Reynolds knew that his parents could definitely live for another century or two. But Monica, Reynolds was worried that if he left, he would regret it for the rest of his life. Miller nodded slightly. Welcome to the village. Remember, you are not allowed to leave the village without permission. If it is discovered that you did, you will definitely die. No matter what, you had best not harbor any doubts about how powerful our village is. Miller immediately turned and prepared to leave. Mr. Miller. Reynolds hurriedly said. Miller turned to look at him. What is it? When the other people in the village leave, can they help me carry a message out? Reynolds asked. Miller nodded. Yes, they can. However, you cannot reveal any information regarding the village. In 2 days, I'll be leaving the village. If you have any messages, I can help you transmit them. Reynolds felt a surge of joy. And he hurriedly said, Lord Miller, when you leave the village, please go to any of the Dawson conglomerate's branches and tell them that I, Reynolds Dunstan, am not dead. Right now, I am happily alive, and I hope my friends and family won't be worried about me. The Dawson conglomerate. Miller glanced at him, then nodded. Lord Miller. Reynolds suddenly realized something. Didn't you just say that only the top 10 in the annual tournament are allowed to make a trip? Why is it that you can leave whenever you want? Miller glanced at him. Once you are at my level of power, you can also leave whenever you wish. As he spoke, with a single movement Miller suddenly vanished from in front of Reynolds. Reynolds' heart was filled with shock. This speed was simply too terrifying. Milord, that Reynolds isn't very powerful, but it seems as though Miss Monica feels rather. Miller stood to one side respectfully, while a handsome, refined-looking middle-aged man with long black hair sat on a stone chair, casually sipping wine. The refined middle-aged man laughed calmly. Monica is free to like whoever she wants. Don't force her. For Reynolds to choose to remain in the village means that he has courage, at least. But the madam, Miller said. The refined middle-aged man laughed. Ha ha, as for that, there's nothing I can do either. If that Reynolds really has taken a liking to my daughter, then all I can do is suggest that he work hard. Otherwise, he won't even be able to pass my wife's approval. Tomorrow, when you head to the Forest of Darkness, be careful. Don't irritate the king of the Forest of Darkness. The refined middle-aged man glanced at Miller. Yes, milord. Miller said respectfully. The next morning, a blur suddenly streaked out at high speed away from the mountain village. In the blink of an eye, it pierced through the skies as it flew towards the north at high speed. The speed at which it traveled was a good deal faster than even Linley's speed in full dragon form. An hour or so later, That blur arrived at the forest of darkness. HRM. The astonishing speed lessened, and from high up above, Miller stared down below. Black Dirt City was located quite close to the forest of darkness, only 50 or so kilometers away from it. Miller was currently directly above Mt. Black Raven. Although he had been flying at high speed, he could sense a powerful amount of wind-style energy coming from below. Someone else who also trains in the laws of the wind. Miller's eyes lit up. Miller was studying the laws of the wind as well. He carefully examined Mt. Black Raven, and saw a human form, dressed in a deep blue robe, who was wielding a violet long sword. That human form constantly flickered about in multiple places in Mt. Black Raven at an astonishingly fast speed. His level of understanding is quite excellent. It has been centuries since I've sparred with another wind-style expert. Miller's heart itched. He flew down at high speed. By now, Linley had noticed this human form flying down from the skies at high speed. Miller landed directly atop the crown of a tree on Mt. Black Raven. Standing on the tree's crown, he stared at the nearby Linley and laughed loudly. "I am Miller, also a student of the laws of the wind. My friend, would you be willing to have a competition with me?" Book 9, His Fame Shakes the World, Chapter 50, Linley and Olivier. Linley looked at the man standing on the tree crown. His short silver hair made him look very energetic and intrepid. That wavy blue robe fluttered in the wind, making him seem agile and graceful. An expert. Linley had the feeling that this silver-haired man's power was no less than his own. "I am Linley." Linley didn't try to hide his identity. "Linley? The O'Brien Empire's Linley?" Miller said with surprise, but then he laughed. "I've long heard that the O'Brien Empire has a 27-year-old genius, who has reached a high level of achievement as a sculptor, as a magus, and as a warrior. I didn't expect that today I'd be able to encounter you. You were on par with Hateson. I, Miller, would like to spar with you, brother." Linley had a very good impression of Miller as well. Miller was open and direct, just the type of person Linley liked. "Very well. Then I will have a good sparring match with you, brother Miller." Having spent such a long period of time in training, Linley also desired to have a good sparring match against an expert. Perhaps he would gain a sudden insight. Linley removed the deep blue robe covering his upper body, letting it be bare. And then, black scales quickly began to cover Linley's body, and those ferocious spikes emerged from his forehead, spine, elbows, and knees. Seeing this, Miller's eyes lit up. "Dragon Blood Warrior. Ha, I've heard of this for some time now." Linley's body began to be covered with that roiling, swirling layer of azurish black battle chi. Wielding blood violet in his hands, Linley looked at Miller. "Come." With a flip of his hand, Miller withdrew a silvery white longsword from out of nowhere. Laughing loudly, he said, "Linley, you must be careful. The power of my sword technique isn't much weaker than Hateson's attack." Miller spoke with total confidence. Linley was secretly startled. Linley knew very well how powerful Hateson's World Breaker attack was. "Careful!" Miller shouted loudly, then his body slashed through the air, immediately appearing next to Linley. With a kick of his feet, Linley leapt backwards at high speed, but Miller's longsword still brushed against Linley's pulse-guard defense. In the blink of an eye, Linley appeared atop a large tree several hundred meters away. Such incredible speed! "It seems I have to use the wind shadow spell." From this exchange, Linley immediately understood that in terms of understanding the speed aspect of the wind, he was inferior to this man. Linley began to chant the words to the wind shadow magic spell. As for Miller, he paused for a while, still wielding that silver longsword as he waited for Linley to complete his wind shadow spell. Only when Linley did so did Miller charge towards Linley at high speed again. "Linley, show me your ultimate attack." Whoosh! Whoosh! Linley's body moved at a similarly high speed. Right now, the two were on par as far as speed went, and they dodged and attacked at high speed. Towards the attacking Miller, with a flip of his hand, Linley utilized the rippling wind technique, and in an instant, countless violet sword tips slashed down, covering Miller's entire body. Excellent! Miller laughed loudly, and suddenly, the silvery white longsword seemed to slowly draw a circle in front of him. Although it seemed to be slow, in actuality, before Linley's rippling wind attacks managed to land on Miller, they were all destroyed by that circle. Linley was secretly delighted. Has Miller trained in a type of extremely slow aspect of the wind? Slow. Fast. The so-called slow and fast weren't purely about speed, it was about a higher level of understanding. For example, although Miller's attack seemed to be slow, in actuality, it wasn't the slightest bit slower than Linley's rippling wind technique. Miller, take another one of my attacks. Linley shouted loudly. Linley and Miller were constantly dodging. With each light tap against the tree leaves, the two could instantly change direction at high speed. Suddenly, the two once again clashed in the air above Mt. Black Raven. Linley's dreamlike blood-violet longsword seemed to encompass both an extremely fast speed as well as an extremely slow tempo, combining these two polar opposites into a single seemingly perfect whole. Excellent! Miller let out a loud shout of surprised joy. Miller's longsword suddenly reduced in speed to an extremely low level, as though it weighed 10 trillion pounds and could barely move. Linley could sense how extremely slothful the movements of the opponent's sword had become. But his blood-violet sword remained unable to break through the sword. Boom! The two swords collided. Linley felt as though he had suddenly been hit at high speed by something weighing 10 trillion pounds. His body shuddered and was sent flying against the nearby mountain cliffs, smashing into the heart of the mountain. On the cliffs, a human-shaped tunnel could now be seen. Whoosh! A while later, Linley came flying back out. Miller was extremely excited. Linley, your sword art, slow and fast? Two totally opposite aspects. This, Miller felt as though a light had gone off inside his mind, as though he had suddenly realized something. Linley was also extremely shocked and delighted as well. Linley didn't even care about that line of blood trailing down from the corner of his lips. The only thing he was thinking about was that sword technique his opponent had just used. Miller defended against my rippling wind attack using a technique which was gentle as a breeze. But this technique he just used was extremely powerful, not one whit inferior than Hatsun's World Breaker technique. If it wasn't for the fact that I have gained some additional insights into the throbbing pulse of the world, I probably would have been severely injured. That sword technique was derived from a variation of the slow aspect of the laws of the wind. During that moment, it seemed as though space itself had frozen. Linley could still clearly remember how he had felt when facing that sword. That sword had moved so slowly, as though it weighed 10 trillion pounds, but space itself seemed to have frozen as well. Linley had clearly sensed that his opponent's sword was extremely slow, but despite the fact that his own sword was extremely fast, in that moment, it somehow wasn't faster than his opponent's. Miller and Linley both had looks of surprised delight on their face. They smiled, standing there in mid-air. Recovering from their ponderings, the two looked at each other and grinned. Clearly, both had gained certain insights. Linley, I had never imagined that two opposite aspects could actually be used to aid each other. You truly have helped me out. Miller was a little bit excited. Indeed, in that mysterious mountain village, none of his friends trained in the laws of the wind, and thus they were unable to help him. Linley spoke words of thanks as well. Miller, I've been pondering how to continue analyzing the slow and fast aspect and how to train them. You've helped me clearly see how I should go about it as well. As far as my insights into the laws of the wind go, I don't have any deeper insights to show you. Let's just call a stop to it for now. What do you say? Linley advised. Miller pursed his lips. Linley, don't be modest. I know, that your true, most powerful attack is with a heavy sword. Supposedly, despite Hatesun's ridiculously strong defense, he was still heavily injured by you. Come. Let me have a try. Miller said expectantly. Linley hesitated slightly. Once the profound truths of the earth was used, it would be very dangerous. It might kill him. It's fine. Linley, just come. Let me have a taste of your most powerful attack. My defense is extremely formidable. Miller laughed confidently. Seeing how confident the man was and how he had requested Linley repeatedly to attack, Linley nodded. At the same time, Linley had made up his mind that he would execute the 100-layered waves attack of the profound truths of the earth. He wouldn't go all the way to his limits of 138 layered waves. Given the power his opponent had displayed, he should be able to withstand the 100-layered waves. In the air above Mt. Black Raven, Linley and Miller stood, facing each other. Linley was now wielding the adamantine heavy sword. Come. Miller said with a bit of excitement. Miller, be careful. As he spoke, Linley suddenly charged towards Miller, creating a terrifying sonic boom. Miller just stood there, casually wielding his silvery longsword and slowly waving it in front of himself. Space once again froze. Linley's adamantine heavy sword agilely and lightly smashed downwards. A silvery longsword that was very light, but seemingly weighed 10 trillion pounds. An adamantine heavy sword that was very heavy, yet seemed to move very agilely and gracefully. As soon as the adamantine heavy sword drew near that silver longsword, it was caught within the frozen space. The two swords intersected. Boom. Profound truths of the earth, 100-layered waves? What shocked Linley was that when those vibrational waves passed through that frozen space, it quickly began to weaken in power. By the time it passed through and entered Miller's body, it had lost more than half of its power. But despite that, Miller's eyes lit up. His entire body suddenly was surrounded by waves of energy, but despite that, a hint of blood still came out from the corner of his lips. He stared at Linley in astonishment. Linley, your attack truly is bizarre. My defense can be considered a very special one, but your attack. When experts did battle, they had to be proficient in speed, defense, and attack. If they were weak in a single area, then they would find themselves in danger. Miller's defense was very special as well. As he circulated the dragon blood battle chi in his body, Linley's wounds rapidly began to heal, but he stared at Miller in astonishment. Miller, that sword of yours, I keep on having the feeling that it seems to have caused space itself to change. It was precisely because space had changed that Linley's vibrational attacks would weaken so much when passing through it. Miller laughed. It does indeed cause space to change. I can't clearly explain it. When you gain insight on this aspect, you will naturally understand it. Linley nodded slightly as he returned to his human form. All right, then. Linley, I'm very glad to have met you today and made friends with you. If you ever want to come looking for me, you can come to the southern reaches of the Anarchic lands. There's a relatively well-known city there known as South Mount City. Roughly 100 kilometers south of South Mount City is a large mountain, and within that mountain there is a small mountain village. I live there. Miller laughed. Linley nodded in appreciation. When I am free, I will definitely go. Several of my good friends, as well as my lord, live there as well. If you come there and spar, you will improve more quickly as well. Miller said warmly. I have some business in the Forest of Darkness. I'll have to bid you farewell for now. After saying his goodbyes to Miller, Linley watched as Miller rapidly flew towards the north, into the endless Forest of Darkness. Then Linley chuckled and, with a leap, flew to a nearby flat stone. He sat down atop of it into the meditative posture, quietly reflecting on the insights he had gained on various profound mysteries during that sparring match. To the north of the Yulon continent was the boundless northern sea. North of the Northern Sea was the Arctic ice cap. The Arctic ice cap was extremely vast, several times larger than the entire Yulon continent. However, aside from some powerful magical beasts who lived there, there were virtually no inhabitants. The Arctic ice cap was formed from nothing more than extremely hard ice. Whoosh! Cold wind slashed past the glaciers like icy knives, shearing pieces of ice off. The Arctic ice cap was an extremely cold place, and extremely dangerous. Even powerful warriors would find it very hard to live here. However, this bitter, desolate environment did have a few experts who lived here quietly. Beneath an iceberg that was tens of thousands of meters high, two experts engaged in battle at high speed. One of them was Olivier, with his opponent being a very well-muscled, yet skinny, cruel-looking man with short jade hair. The cruel-looking man was using nothing more than a pair of dark golden boxing gloves. Whoosh! Light shadow flashing, Olivier appeared in the air above the cruel-looking man, then chopped downwards with his sword. The cruel-looking man dodged this attack, and then immediately viciously kicked out with his leg against Olivier. On the surface of the leg was a clearly visible edge of air, and it chopped against Olivier like a warblade. The blade of air was far more distinct and visible than the one produced by Linley's tempos of the wind technique. Boom! Olivier and his sword were both sent flying by this kick, landing and smashing viciously against the tough, frozen ground. Boom! The icy ground split apart, and dozens of enormous cracks appeared. Olivier vomited a mouthful of fresh blood onto the ground. Humph! Olivier, you dare challenge Lord Rutherford Lias Ifuda? You can't even beat me. In the Arctic ice cap, you are nothing more than the bottom rung. Train hard. The cruel-looking man said coldly, and then he flew into the skies at high speed, disappearing into that enormous iceberg that was tens of thousands of meters high. Olivier coughed once, then stood up. Staring upwards at the iceberg, he said, "Next time, I will definitely defeat you." And then, Oliver's body flickered, then disappeared from the snowy land.